That is not something I want.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think we got quorum, so I'm going to go ahead and start. We have two major presentations today, so I do want to go ahead and get started so those presenters can do their thing. So anybody like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's see, introductions. We have Vice President Bob Miller, Christine Michaels from the Courier, and Crystal Porras from the IFO office. Did I miss anybody? Okay, oh, Amy Ulmer, Dean of the English Division. Oh, and I'm sorry, Deborah Cantorero from the Classified Center. Okay, first thing on the agenda is just to approve the minutes. So you should have received a copy of the minutes from the last meeting. Does anybody have any changes at this time to the minutes that they'd like to bring to the attention of the body? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes? Thank you, Ani. And second? Okay, thank you. Okay, any discussion of the minutes? Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? One abstention? Thank you. Okay, in that case, let's move to public comment. Would anybody like to make public comment? Okay, please go ahead. Simon.
Good afternoon. This is actually my first academic senate meeting for this semester. My name is Simon Fraser. I'm the Associated Students President for 1213. I just have a couple of announcements. One of the things that AS is really happy to be working on this year is accreditation, and so we are going to be looking to interface directly with our academic senate partners in preparing our side of evidence for the 12-13 academic year. The second thing I would like everyone to know is that this week is Coming Out Week, and that is for LGBTIQQ and the rest of the alphabet that exists. I myself am a gay male, and the reason that I come out every year, and I've done this for the academic senate now twice, is because I think it's still important that we recognize, especially today, that there are a lot of people who aren't very friendly to everyone else, and I think the faculty holds a major role in ensuring that everyone on this campus, regardless of your belief, regardless of what you hold dear, whether you are gay or straight, whether you're religious in any particular way, that coming together in a campus community is important, and being together, tolerant, and opening a dialogue is very important. Faculty plays an extremely important role in that, as does the staff, as does everyone who works at the college, and so I hope that you will all take that forward to your classrooms and to your students over the next week. And finally, I want to wish you all a good academic year. It's been a hard one so far. I think we'll all agree this has been pretty trying. Associated Students is willing and ready to work with our academic senate partners in shared governance. We are absolutely ready to go. So as soon as we move forward, I'm excited that there's going to be revisions to shared governance today that we're going to talk about, and we look forward to continuing a relationship that's been established over the last 2 years and increasing that relationship and increasing the cooperation between our two bodies.
And so, did you get my email I sent to you on Friday?
I did not.
You didn't? Okay. Talk to me later. Okay. And then Dan, did you?
Yes. Dustin, I'd like to bring up the issue of the imposed calendar. This calendar was imposed on us beginning just before this semester started. And this is after the calendar committee passed a calendar with an winter session ratified by the academic senate. And after all that, it was just kind of thrown aside, and this new calendar was imposed. Now, this calendar has wreaked havoc on planning for students, faculty, and classified staff. And you know from personal experience that it's been the subject of very outspoken protest at the Board of Trustees meetings. And I've tried to get this issue discussed at this body, at the academic senate, for the last couple of meetings, and you've told me, no, it's not on the agenda. Well, last Monday I asked you, well, let's get it on the agenda. And you said, okay, great. Write up a proposal, send it to me by Thursday noon, and we'll get it on the agenda. So I did exactly that, and you responded back to me and you said, I'm sorry, the agenda's full. We can't cover it. So, now I want to make it clear that I'm not asking you to support this. If you're opposed to it, fine. But, as a matter of fact, I don't even know if the Senate board is going to agree with me here, but I would like to get it out here for discussion. And I don't understand why you've been avoiding bringing this up. We brought it up at the Academic Senate retreat back in August. And we made it clear that this is an important issue, and you've just been avoiding it. Could you please explain why you've been avoiding this?
Well, first of all, I'm not avoiding it. Okay, second of all, there's two big issues that I want to bring to the attention of the whole body. Number one is that at the last executive committee of the Academic Senate a week ago, the 4 members of the executive committee met and talked about this particular issue. And we came to a majority opinion that the best way to proceed on this particular matter was for us to pursue a joint statement of all 4 major share governance groups, that would be Classified Senate, AS, and the Management Association, along with us, to talk about the sort of breakdown in share governance. So I've sent an email to that effect. I was asked, I don't know if Simon got it. I don't know if Denise got it. But that was the majority opinion of the group. The statement came after I had given Judy the agenda. Second, the statement sort of just didn't match with what the sort of majority opinion of the executive committee was at that time. So I said in my email to you that I think it's best for us to discuss that statement and on next Monday. And if the consensus is that basically it should go into the agenda in that form, then we will do so at our next meeting.
Listen, I certainly didn't agree with that. And I'm not asking you to agree with my position here. I'm asking you to get it on the agenda, which you haven't done.
So let's talk about that next Monday, and then we'll proceed further at that.
So we're going to postpone it again.
Well, it can't be on today's agenda, because today's agenda is already.
So next, earliest it can be is next meeting of the Academic Senate, which
Yes.
is going to be the first reading, and then we have to wait until the next meeting to have a vote on it. That'll be the second reading. So you've kind of postponed it another month.
Well, nothing's been postponed. You know, and also, there's no discussion on public comment. That I really believe that. Personally, I believe that continuing to divide the campus on this particular issue, where it's very clear that the opinion of the entire faculty has never been really determined. It's never been clearly determined exactly where the faculty is. I think that pretty much all of us agree that it was done at a time that was basically faculty was away. And there's been some concern about the process. The actual matter, the statement that you gave me, was much more strong in terms of sort of snaking statements about what the faculty felt when we don't even know. So I would actually prefer, if there was some kind of a statement like this to be going out, that it should be put out to all faculty, and that all faculty should be voting with a clear sense that we get opinion of the entire group, not just the people who are in this room, not just the representatives, but all members of the faculty. That's just my opinion. But when we'll discuss this next Monday, and if the executive committee decides that it belongs on the agenda, you have my word, it will be there.
I don't agree that the faculty are divided on this. The calendar committee re-voted on this issue, and they voted to reject the imposed calendar. And that's a representative body. And you know what I've been trying to do is get it out on the table so people can discuss it, so we can find out how the faculty feel about this. And somehow it just never seems to get on the table here.
Okay. Well, I'll take that. I'll take this into consideration. We will talk about it next Monday, and then we'll proceed accordingly when that time comes. Yes, really quick.
Public comment.
Sure, please.
Okay. I'm here as a member of the calendar committee, and we do not have the power to reject a calendar. What we do is we finalize dates on the calendar structure that have been given to us. As a committee, we do not decide the structure of the calendar. And since I was the one that made the motion, I'm here to clarify what that motion was and my intent behind the motion. And the motion was to reaffirm our support and our approval of the calendar that included the winter session. And when I made that motion, it was essentially to indicate that we as a body did not approve the tentative student calendar, as it has been called, but we don't have the power to change that calendar. I made that motion knowing that it was a gesture and more for something being on the record, and with the full knowledge that nothing would probably result from it, and that if administration even did decide to go ahead and change the calendar back, that that they could carry through with the suggestion that they made that we would have a winter session without any classes at all. So we did not vote to reject the calendar without winter. We don't have the capacity to do that. We simply reaffirmed our support of the calendar that included winter. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, public comment?
Yeah. So I understand why the executive committee decided to put its position, the Senate, with all the other ones, but why not take a stand itself? If you want to align ourselves with others, that's fine, but why are we not, why did the executive committee not say, let's do one by ourselves and then do one together? And you said this thing about not dividing the campus. The campus is already divided. So I don't think we're going to divide any more than it already is. So what was the rationale for the committee to say, let's only do participate with the rest of them? Why not by ourselves?
Well, we think the statement would have more power if it came from all four groups.
Oh, I agree. But in addition to.
If it's the will of the body to let the executive committee know that we should put it on the agenda, let us know over the course of the next week. Let us know, and then we will take, I form the agenda in the consultation with the executive committee. And so again, let me know over the next week, send me an email, give me a phone call, and we'll proceed accordingly next Monday.
So does that mean if I were to send you an email, I would like you to put this on the agenda, you'll then consult with the committee?
Consult with the committee.
But if the committee doesn't want to, then it won't be on the agenda.
That is the will of the executive committee.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, any more public comment?
Yes.
Yes.
Public comment. Two things. With regard to what Eduardo said, I think that that's genius. Could we make it even easier and just take a vote, members of this room, who would like it on the next calendar?
I don't think that's
We
Brown.
can't do that in.
We can do that? We can poll the body? Okay, I guess is that parliamentarian? I don't think our parliamentarian is here.
Not on public comment.
I think we can do it on public comment, though. We can?
I believe we can. It doesn't hold anything. It's just giving you information to work from.
Okay, I have no objection. Do you want to take a roll, Judy? Yes. I don't vote.
Okay. Penella?
Abstain.
Jessica?
I'm in support.
What is it we're voting on anyway?
Putting it on the calendar.
So have a discussion about the calendar at the next full academic.
So you're just asking people if they want to talk?
An agenda item.
Mhm.
Just giving us advice.
Okay. Dan Haley?
Yes.
Mark Dodge, not here. Ani Dodge?
Abstain.
Danny Hammond?
Yes.
Tomas Riojas?
Yes.
Patricia DeOrange Martin?
She's all.
Sorry. Deborah Bird?
Abstain.
Marjorie Smith? Roger Marheim?
Yes.
Okay. Martha Bonilla's not here. Krista Walter?
Yes.
Tom Niederer?
Yes.
Blanca Rodriguez? She here? Okay. Lori Gallardi? Not here, okay. Terry Stoddard? Not here. Andres Borja?
Yes.
Lakna Prasad?
Yes.
Dorothy Potter?
Yes.
Kathleen Uyikawa?
Abstain.
Pat Peach?
Yes.
Katie Rodriguez?
Abstain.
Valerie Foster?
Yes.
Tad Carpenter?
Abstain.
Mark Whitwood?
Abstain.
Lauren Aronson?
Yes.
Eduardo Cairo?
Yes.
Okay, okay, so we have two social sciences, so I'm not going to call the alternates. Joe Bushko?
Yes.
Yolanda McKay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
You want me to tally these out?
Oh, no, you don't need to do that.
Can I
Yes.
just finish up?
Sure.
I know all of us in this room are also members of the Faculty Association, and I know that one of the concerns that's been expressed in here today and at other times, that there's a lack of statistical data, one could say, to support. Do all faculty feel this way? There are a lot of us, so I think it's really difficult to come up with some of those statistics. But I just want to thank the Faculty Association for the great work that you've done putting that analysis in our box and asking for our opinions and really allowing us to speak our minds. And I thought that they really should be applauded for that effort. Whether we agree or disagree, it doesn't matter. We really had that opportunity to speak. So thank you very much.
Still have a comment, Joe, or-
Yes.
Okay,
I-
please.
Well, actually, it's a comment on what we just did, but would it be reasonable to have the Academic Senate do a survey of the faculty before we come back to the major meeting?
That would be my wish.
And that way, you get a sense, I mean, we all may feel very differently in this room, but I think one of the things that we've been sorely remiss on is that we don't get a full body response either from Faculty Association or Academic Senate. And I think each one needs to register their vote. I mean, you may have a survey that you want to ask, because I think the executive leadership needs to represent all of us. Not, I mean, it'd be clear if it's always a majority on the executive board that that's unfair to a person who may have a real strong point for the rest of the body. And I'm not saying it's that, but I think it's a chance for everyone to be represented on their own vote.
Is still public comment? Dave?
Yes, and please after the calendar. And again, I hope the survey isn't just about whether you prefer the calendar the way it was or the way it's going to be or whatever, but also about the process and about whether you agree with what's been done, because this has been a unilateral move by the administration. So to me, it's understanding, it's not a fight about what the calendar is, it's the process. I think if we went through the process and the process had come up with the calendar that was proposed by the administrator, there's absolutely no shared governance in this calendar. Not one committee worked on that calendar. So I think that's the biggest problem. But anyway, if you do a survey, I think there's two issues. Do you want it one way or the other, and do you agree with the process?
Okay. So we'll try to get a survey together between now and next month. Okay. Unless there's any further public comment? Yes, please.
I just want everyone to be reminded, the reps especially, that we're moving into the time of the sabbatical application process. And so we have 2 workshops scheduled. One is for this week on Thursday, the 11th. That one will be in this room. And then one next week on Tuesday, and that one is in room C227. So I'm not asking you to go out and recruit people to apply for sabbaticals, but I would like it if you would just do your best to make sure everyone got this information on that green paper that was sent out from HR, but sometimes little reminders are helpful. And so that if people want it, they don't have to come to a workshop, but if they do. Now, this is just for all of our information. We have not one clue how many sabbaticals will be funded this year. Up until this year, we have maintained a good number. We've been consistently funding, well, close to 12, 14 people a year have gone on sabbatical. So I do know that this year there's a new statement that's appeared on the form that we all got, making it clear that this is, subject to availability of funds. So I have no idea what that means. I hope that we are still certainly going to have some sabbaticals. But if we get any information as to how many we're possibly funding, we will pass that along.
Thank you, Pat.
So what time are those meetings?
Noon.
On the survey, so we are going to do a survey? And
We'll talk about it. We
Okay.
can't make a decision right now, but we'll talk
Does
about
that-
it. But it's most likely there will be.
Who determines what questions will be asked in the survey, and how does that go about? The question being formed?
Bring your, ultimately the executive committee will be deciding, but let us know what you think.
Or
Over the next,
give you
over
like-
the next couple of days, because we'll be, well, again, I don't want to discuss it now because it's not an agenda item.
Right, so if
But
I-
we will put it together.
So if I have some questions I would like to be on
Let
this,
us know.
to provide
Let
to
us
you.
know.
Okay.
Okay.
Dustin?
Yes.
Just on a lighter note, the flu is coming.
Thank God for
Yeah.
There is a light.
It's right there outside the door.
So I just want you to know, as your college health person, that we have free flu shots for you this year. We don't have to have you buy tickets, and you don't have to pay $15. So we will be offering those in the quad for 3 full days in October. So you can pick up a flyer. It is free. I mean, I can't have a better deal for you this year. So we want you well and healthy so you can come in and fight. Okay.
Thank you, Joe.
What days are they?
Here you go.
Okay. And for all of you with kids,
Thank you.
definitely get that. Okay, I want to move to the first and only real actual voting item on today's agenda. and that is the Equivalency Committee bylaw. It's sort of been renamed based on our discussion last time. And I thought that what Susie's really looking for here is for us to give sort of the Academic Senate sort of stamp of approval to what she's been doing for years on the Equivalency Committee. So this is not in conflict with the hiring policy that actually was just passed by the board last week. But I just think that what Susie's looking is for some validation from this body of what she's been doing is kosher and is okay. So I bring it before you today, hopefully that the Senate can sort of just give its approval to this particular policy. Actually, we even used it this past week to approve another, I think it was from actually BAM, another particular equivalency case. So I would be willing to entertain a motion to approve this particular, now it's called a Equivalency Committee bylaw. Thank you, Tom. And Katie seconded. Okay, any discussion of this item? Yes.
Okay, I think that the one thing that is missing from the memo is what happens if the Equivalency Committee is not in session over the summer.
And actually, I have information on that. I spoke to Lori Cortez from HR on Friday, and what she recommends is that we have, first of all, the Executive Committee of the Academic Senate be on call to come in and sign an emergency basis, and that we recruit probably about 2 or 3 other individuals who would be willing to be on call. You have to be sort of close to campus, because sometimes it happens quickly. Like I had to sign it on Friday quickly. She showed me the information because it was a real emergency. A person needed to get approved. So we are supposed to be all on call. And I'd be looking for members of this body who would be willing to sort of just come in, take a look at the information when the Equivalency Committee is not available, and just sign that this particular person deserves equivalency. She tries to call Susie in. She tries to call other members of that committee in. But if they're not available, we would be available first. And if we weren't available, then they would be recruiting 2 or 3 more. So you don't have to raise your hand now, but if you're interested in being on that list, I would pass it along to HR and to Susie, and then basically Lori might give you a call. So that's the that's the latest from HR. In fact, it just came up on Friday. Another case of VAMS. It seems like VAMS is the most common one. Okay. Any other questions or concerns? Okay, then all those in favor of approving this Equivalency Committee bylaw, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. And Susie will be very thankful. Okay, in that case, I want to turn the floor over to Crystal Porras, who is going to present to the Senate the Policy 2000 revise.
So I liked ours come with a little PowerPoint, a little color. If I can get it up first. And let me just say that you're not actually going to look at policy per se as much as a conceptual overview of how we might possibly reframe shared governance on the campus. So this is my my road show basically on how this might happen, and if my PowerPoint never comes up, well, okay.
It's my bad. You gotta just switch it to the computer.
Over.
Sorry.
My bad.
I thought I had already done it.
You want the lights on or off?
No, let's see what it looks like. It's really purple. Okay, so what we're proposing, or what's been bantered around here, is the Academic Senate actually came to me with this idea that BRAC, which was our Budget and Resource Allocation Committee, was not a strong enough committee on this campus. So they proposed to me that BRAC become BRAC 2.0, which is called PARC, and it become its own shared governance committee on equal standing with the IEC, which is the Institutional Effectiveness Committee. So I took the lead on that, and I said, okay, well, if we're going to do that, which I thought was a good idea, maybe there's some other things we need to actually rearrange there too. So in that process, what I've laid out here is basically, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the College Council policy, which actually falls into the body of the Shared Governance Policy 2000. What I'm proposing here is that we remove the College Council from the Shared Governance Policy and give it its own policy and procedures and strengthen it as a Shared Governance Committee on this campus. As you can also see, I'm proposing that that be chaired by our Academic Senate President and the Senior Vice President of Academic and Student Affairs. So what I've also done then on each of these committees is reframe them to be chaired by positions as opposed to individual people rotating up. hopefully that gives it just a tad bit more continuity from year to year. There was 9 standing committees that were formed under the College Council, which I have now moved and kind of spread them out over the other shared governance committees to try to hopefully make some sense of this. So as I move through this, let's see what I'm talking about. So Policy 2000, which is our shared governance policy, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with this. In there we actually have CAPA, which is actually not a shared governance committee. It doesn't have representation from management or classified on it, so technically not shared governance or students. And so what I'm proposing is that GAP gets moved to the Academic Senate bylaws, because that's actually where it belongs, and that we pull out the College Council from this Policy 2000 and build its own policy and procedures. That's step 1. So that's the new College Council policy, which would be 2010. Has
Can you go back to the last slide?
Sure.
Okay.
We're good?
Yeah, thank you.
So the new policy, which has not been written yet, there's just kind of a framework for it, 2010, which would be the policy on College Council, which removes it again from 2000, provides its own policy procedures. I've already told you who would co-chair it. 2 working groups as opposed to standing committees. The idea is that the 3 central committees, the IEC, the College Council, and Park, would work as Brown Act committees, whereas these standing committees underneath, which we now call working groups, will become exactly that, working groups, where there's the time and the ability to have more of a free-flow dialogue within those meetings. We're also talking about changing the name of the Planning and Priorities Committee to Accreditation and Strategic Planning, since that's technically what its charge was. So again, working on these and making them more open dialogue sorts of committees. Writing a new Planning and Resources Committee, Park Policy 2020. Again, having this chaired by the Senior Vice President, College and Business Services, and a Vice President of the Academic Senate. 4 working groups from College Council: Facilities, Sustainability, Health and Safety, and Administrative Computing. This is the IEC, which is actually a policy and procedure that currently exists. They would revise theirs to include the standing committees or the working groups of enrollment management, professional development, and instructional technology. Now, in case I missed it on the first slide, I wanted to point out that under College Council, the calendar committee would stay there, as would the planning and priorities, which would be accreditation and strategic planning. Okay, so co-chair responsibilities are designated to positions. 3 main shared governance committees conducted as Brown Act. The 9 standing committees are distributed under the 3 main committees. They're working groups, not under Brown Act restrictions, and soon, in fact, they provide a stronger representation on the 3 main committees, the IEC, College Council, and Park. Yes?
Your last point, student and faculty are provided stronger representation on 3 main committees. As I currently understand it, IEC is one of the co-chairs is a faculty member. By removing faculty as co-chair possibilities.
Not removing faculty as a co-chair. I'm putting a vice president of the Academic Senate in as a co-chair.
Okay, but that then would require, so then there's the, what is it, Dean of General Education and Assessment would be one of the chairs.
Program review, yeah. The Associate Dean of General Education and Program Review. Currently, it's a management position anyway. The co-chairs it with a faculty member. What we're doing is saying that the faculty co-chair would now be a member of the Academic Senate and a vice president of the Academic Senate. So it's still a faculty member, unless I misunderstand how that works.
No, that's still a faculty member. I'm just wondering why that switch, why require it to be the vice president of Academic Senate rather than someone designated by the Academic Senate?
We felt that that would give the Academic Senate and the faculty stronger representation, because it would also be a person then who is involved with the Academic Senate, sits on their executive committee. And what we're trying to do across these committees is have more overlap and representation. So when the Academic Senate is dealing with an issue that might affect the IEC, we have more direct links between these committees.
Okay, here's my concern with that. Last semester, it was apparently proposed by someone in Academic Senate that IEC take over recommendations for program discontinuance, and IEC ultimately voted not to do that. Now, had the Vice President of Academic Senate been a co-chair, because really just two people made that decision. The co-chairs made the decision that that was not the charge of the IEC. Had this current makeup been in charge of that decision last year, that outcome could have been significantly different. I see a conflict of interest, given that it was apparently Academic Senate. That was what they said, that's what the co-chair said. It was Academic Senate that made that request for program discontinuance, for IEC to be in charge of those recommendations.
I gotta say, I don't remember that.
Well, another problem
It
that I.
was a 2-3 week discussion.
It's the same thing it's the same thing that we were discussing last week where the power gets accumulated, the same
It's the same people.
people. And none of us here like that. So when you say that, that's, sort of another way that, it's the same people who are in the committees that are making the decisions that affect all of us.
But there is a lot stronger faculty representation. Using the Vice President of the Academic Senate and the Associate Dean of General Education just provides us with continuity in
But
just
what
running
if we
meetings.
don't want continuity? What if we want,
Diversity there.
diversity?
Well, like I said, we're beefing up the faculty membership.
So
on these committees.
I would prefer that it be somebody that is nominated and appointed by Faculty Senate, not our Vice President.
Well, how do you get your Vice President?
We've already, we voted the Vice President to
faculty.
be Vice President,
Right, so now you would be
and-
voting for, now
We'd be
everybody would be
voting
voting for the
for-
chair of
well-
IEC.
Yeah, but I would like to divide those positions. I don't think that the same person should be in the same
Right,
position.
like make the executive committee exempt from these, you cannot be, so we have more diversity of representation, not having the same people on this committee and on that committee, where you're saying it's giving faculty more representation, it's the same people again.
You need to raise your hands when you want to speak. We've got a hand over here.
Katie,
that's
please
been
go ahead.
up for a while.
Okay, I maybe I misinterpret this, going off of what was presented to PNP. Isn't this not the same Vice President of the Academic Senate? Like, isn't this actually creating 2 more members of the Executive Committee of the Academic Senate?
Basically, what this is doing is, Sheila Rose is the current faculty co-chair of IEC. All it's doing is making her a member of the executive committee of the academic senate, effectively.
No.
But then in the future, it would be elected.
I mean,
Is that what
an elected position?
IEC committee, it's a different committee.
So it's not, I have no problem with Sheila being an executive person, but she has to go through the normal process of being elected.
Well, she would, the position would, the position would, the position would.
Yeah.
But if the position were in the future, but I'm saying that position that she's in is being made a member of the executive committee of the academic senate, like it is at a lot of other campuses.
So just to follow up, so that would mean we would have 3 Academic Senate Vice Presidents, is that
2.
correct? 2.
And they're both voted upon?
They're both voted in.
Hmm?
And one of them is just specifically part of another committee?
I don't think she heard you. Can you clarify this a little bit more? I think now I'm more confused.
My understanding is that the Academic Senate would create another Vice President position that is a voted upon elected position within the Academic Senate, and that person's position would be to serve as the co-chair of the IEC. That's what I understood.
So it is diverse.
It's a still voted in position, it's just that what we're doing is that this person then is actually a part of the Academic Senate as a Vice President, so that they're very involved in the Academic Senate, as well as being the co-chair of the IEC.
Please.
This is a change from our present bylaws. This would have to be vetted and go through our whole process. So it couldn't be done in the snap of a finger. And it's not an assured thing until the Academic Senate as a group has a chance. This sounds like, again, a little group kind of nodded their head and said, fine, put it in there, I'm sure it'll be fine. Well, that's a little bit putting the cart before the horse. I don't want to speak of us as carts and horses, but all of you know what I mean. This group has the ownership of deciding, and we haven't begun to even look at restructuring our executive council.
And that's why I said when I started, this was a conceptual framework that we were beginning to vet as a possible direction for us to go in. Nothing's been decided, that's why I'm here. I've been going to various groups to kind of present it, to see how people feel about it so they can be appropriately vetted.
Well, I think it's interesting, frankly, that you would come with this when perhaps our executive council has looked at it, but the rest of us aren't familiar with it at all. And then it sounds like you're presenting this to other groups as well on the campus.
Only to those within the framework. So I went to the college council with it, planning and priorities as seen it too.
Right. But it's like,
Just
And then
just
Dan.
an idea.
Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, Crystal, one little problem. I know you're saying this is just a proposed framework, but on the agenda, this is a first read. Usually first read is, this is the information, and we vote on it next meeting.
Yeah, and I'm sorry about Dan, I did not ask this to be a first read, that's not what I understood this to be.
Okay.
It
I
should
thought
have been
I was
involving
asked
information.
just to bring this conceptual framework in.
Nothing's gonna be going on, nothing's gonna be going on.
Right, good. Just a couple things. Number one, could you send out the website where this is available?
Oh, I don't have it on the web yet, as I
Okay.
said, just a conceptual model and a draft, use this draft down there, we're just kind of working this through.
All right.
Can you give it?
Could you make it available? And number two, could you make the present structure available so people can compare and see what the changes are?
That's already available online in Policy 2000.
Deborah, please.
This has been undertaken by Vince a little bit, but aren't we talking about rewriting the Senate bylaws anyway and increasing the number of executive positions
That's
to be
what this is.
That's on the
consistent
agenda.
with other campuses and other structures? So this is not necessarily inconsistent with that goal. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I think the hard part was is that we realized that once you start this, there were so many other pieces that actually had to go and play. If we made Park as opposed to BRAC, then there was a whole bunch of other stuff that had to happen too. So it was kind of like, well, we could do this piecemeal, or we could try to work on a package deal that just basically restructures everything.
Danny, please, you have your hand up for one.
Okay, so if I understand right, you're talking about adding another vice president to the academic senate.
That is
One
correct.
of the vice presidents would be the co-chair of PARC, and one would be the co-chair of IEC, and the president would be, president of academic senate would be a co-chair of the college council.
That's
So
correct.
those three would be on the executive committee of the academic senate, and they would also be the co-chairs of the three main committees.
That's correct.
Is that right?
That's
Okay.
correct.
And then my other question, as far as the Brown Act goes, the Brown Act doesn't really limit any kind of discussion. All the Brown Act does is make sure that people are on notice about what's going to be discussed, and then that there's an opportunity given for everybody to participate so they can come to those committees. And you don't have to make the subcommittees Brown Act committees, but you could vote that they follow the Brown Act rules. So I would be very concerned about having 9 committees without any kind of Brown Act, because anything can be brought to any committee, and if 3 people show up for that committee, they can then vote, and then it's passed by that committee, and that's considered shared governance and moves on through the process.
Actually, that was why we don't want them to be Brown Act committees and why we want them to be working groups, because they do not vote and they do not make decisions. They would make only suggestions or recommendations to the other committees as to what they've studied, what they've learned, as a working group. Now, I'm not saying they don't publish agendas or that people don't know what they're working on. I don't think they should be working in secret, but they are not decision-making bodies. The purpose of Brown Act is decision-making.
Well, that's not necessarily true.
decisions.
Maybe a couple more comments, Martha, please.
One, that I have a problem with putting calendar in as a working group. It does make decisions, it makes large decisions for the whole campus. And it is a major advisory group to the college council. But those advice, because it is a shared governance committee under the Brown Act, that advice is supposed to be taken under consultation and should be worked with in terms of agreement. So, which is AB 1725. So I have a real problem with putting calendar in as a working group and essentially demoting it to something less than a decision-making body.
And Lenore?
I'm not sure how much of this is just a semantic game, but a recommendation is inherently a decision. You are deciding to recommend something, which this year higher-ups are apparently free to disregard. It still, though, needs to be agendized in advance so that people can be present at this decision-making, recommendation, whatever word we want to label it with, process. And making these non-Brown Act committees eliminates that from happening. My fear here is that recommendations will be made, if you want to use that word, recommendations will be made without the rest of the college community having any sort of notice that these recommendations are even being considered. Seems like another way to reduce transparency rather than enhance it.
And last word will be Simon.
The last word. On the Brown Act, I want us to be really clear on what the provisions of the Brown Act are as far as decisions go and discussions go. There have been a couple, I know that it's coming up later, but in the context of this discussion, even if the three, because we all know there's going to be a vote taken on calendar, whether they're a working group or not, at some point there will be a time when they have a deadlock and a vote will break the deadlock. Let's assume that didn't go through the Brown Act. Fine, it's going to the College Council, which is a Brown Act group. So long as the structure here is adhered to, but I think the big issue is making sure that whatever structure you put into place, because frankly, the calendar committee should be reporting to College Council. All of the 9 committees right now should be reporting to College Council, and most of them haven't been. If that reporting line happens properly, then this won't be an issue, because before the College Council or the IEC or even PARC, and they're all meant to flow into College Council too, before those 3 bodies can make a decision, they have to agendize it, they have to put notice on it before they can, so the campus is aware that the recommendation is X and can then come forward. I have other issues with this, but I don't see the Brown Act as being one, because I think so long as the structure is obeyed to and adhered to, there's a catch.
Thank you, Simon. That's actually exactly what I was thinking. Is that basically, there's a guarantee that any decision that the calendar committee makes must be, in this new structure, it will be required to be looked at by the College Council. If the procedure is being followed. But anyway, I want to move to the next item on the agenda. Okay, I want to take the executive committee recommendations here. I want to take numbers 1 to 4 separately, because number 5 is a whole other issue that I think Pat just brought up. So I just want to, there's 4 appointments. I want to talk about Derek's appointment. There was a discussion of the faculty hiring committee last meeting, and I sort of withdrew my name. Thank you, Crystal, by the way, sorry. So basically, I looked at on my list basically of people who were interested in committees, and Derek's name was sort of there next. So I contacted him, I happened to run into him in the hallway, and he volunteered to be on the Dean of Faculty Committee. So I'm hopeful that that will meet the discussion that we had last time. And the other 3, Susie Lane volunteered last time at our meeting to be the co-chair of the ad hoc plus minus. She's looking for somebody from natural sciences. She said outside the C building. For somebody outside of the C building, I think is who we're to co-chair it with her. So if anybody's interested in co-chairing the plus minus committee with Susie, let us know. And then 2 others that came to our attention over the last couple of weeks. Lori, I probably say her last name wrong, is to the academic rank committee, and Lenora Rogash to the sustainability committee. So I would take those either one at a time or together by the will of the body. Yes?
Yeah. When number 1 was brought up and you requested to remove yourself, I said publicly that I wanted my name there. And then after the meeting, I said I wanted my name there. And then I sent you an email, and I received a phone call from Professor Puglia saying that she had contacted you also, and yet our names are not here. So how does that happen, that our names are not?
Well, basically what I did is I had a list that I collected back in July, I think it was.
You added this, and I added my name last Monday also, because you asked. So.
Okay, as new committees come forward, I'll be going down the list as I see it. I mean, basically there's a list that I have in my office, and I'm just been going down the list, and basically some people requested certain committees over others. Nothing new has come up. No new committees have come up.
But how did you end up with Derek's name versus anyone else?
Because basically the list that I had, he was next on the list.
Well, if that's the case, why didn't you just make that statement?
Because I had to go back and look at my list.
So you knew there was a list,
yes,
and you knew I wanted to be on it, and you said nothing. Rather than tell me there's a list and I'll put you at the bottom of the list, and as they come up, I'll get to you. You just go ahead and apply. So what was the point of doing that? I mean, I thought there was a process. I mean, to simply say, let's just go down the list, I don't think is right. If you have a number of people that want to apply, why not find a way of vetting them and selecting one? Why is it just, well, they're on top of the list?
Okay. Okay, I mean, again, maybe I should rethink the process of the list.
Well,
yes.
On that, who ordered the list? Did you just put?
There's no order on the list. It's just, well, just people who emailed me. They're on the order that they emailed me.
Because last time, the reason why you did it, because there was nobody that wanted to, and all of a sudden there's a list with people's name on it.
Oh, there was never nobody who wanted to do it. I don't think if I said that I misspoke.
In the summertime, there was no.
There was an emergency.
That's why it was an emergency, and you just had to get the same people. Who
Well,
were
let's just take Derek, and if people don't want to approve, he's sitting right there. People, let's be polite to Derek here. If people don't want to approve him, you can disapprove. No one's been appointed. The committee has not met yet. So let's just see what the will of the body is. And if the will of the body is not to appoint him, I will consider others. So again, do you want to take them one at a time? Do you want to take them separately? Yes.
I have a question, but when you consider others, are you going to the next name on the list?
Well, that's how I did it this time. But I could change it if if you have a suggestion about doing it differently, just let me know.
Change it.
Okay. Yes.
I have a concern about process, and this is nothing with Derek at all. But I think when you say it's hard to find someone to serve on hiring committees, I think it's nice to honor those people who step forward and say they want it. So I don't know what the process to make this change, but I would say to you, if you have several people interested, it would be certainly worthy to put them on a list and let the group decide who they want to represent them.
You can see the whole list.
Whoever, I mean, if you have people, I mean, Derek's obviously interested. I'm assuming you can just say I popped up on the list. But Eduardo's interested. Other people are interested. So I think, we're just kind of following your path with the willy-nilly list that you have. So I certainly would think that this group should look at who the representatives would be. I mean, if he publicly mentioned that he wanted to be here, that would only be reasonable.
I would suggest that this be an item that be addressed through the rewriting of our bylaws so that there is a clear process.
But
yes, can I?
I think that's a great recommendation because we're creating essentially a new procedure. Because what our previous procedure had been is exactly what had been followed, which is the academic senate president, whoever it's been for the last few years, as we go through a hiring process, has always sent out a recommendation when there's a new, like, hey, do you want to be on a hiring committee? It goes out to everybody. They respond to it. I don't think Dustin fell out of the procedure that had been established before, but I do agree that perhaps we should have a clarifying process so that it's open and visible to everyone. We might consider that we do that as part of the bylaws so that it's written and documented so it doesn't seem like it's different. Because what I hear is kind of an undertone of suspicion when it's the policy that has been happening for the last, 50 years at PCC.
Well, let me just give you one example. This happened today. Okay, and let me give here the will of the body. Okay, I had Kim Miles from Financial Aid come to my office today. Okay, and she is basically having a small committee that is going to be appointing somebody who's going to be looking at financial aid. I can't remember the exact word, but financial aid applications. And she said that she would like us to appoint a counselor to be on that committee. Okay, so what I did was I went back and looked at my list and I looked at my email. And there were two counselors that basically had requested to be on any sort of counseling-related particular issue. And Harry Bloodgood's name was first. Okay, so he's basically been the person who I'm trying to get in touch with and see if he'd like to do it. But if anybody has any problems with that particular procedure, that is how I did it. Kim came to me today, and I asked her, how long is it before the committee needs to meet? And honestly, sometimes they tell me they need to meet next week. They're already starting to put out things together. And I told her this body has been concerned about that. And she said, I told her I would bring it up to the body. I was going to mention it in my report, but I'm bringing it up now. So basically, Harry Bloodgood was the next person on the list. But again, if anybody has any issues or concerns about that, because they do need to start pretty soon, let me know now. Yes?
First off, Derek and I are colleagues. I consider Derek a friend, so it's nothing between Derek and I. I just didn't like the procedure, by the way it happened. As for this procedure that currently exists, I do think it should change in order to, if there are X amount of people that want to apply, we'll give an opportunity. How we can go about selecting them, I guess, is up to the committee, how we find a better way.
Okay. I agree the bylaw should be changed. I think that's a good suggestion. Okay. Okay, with that, do we want to take these one at a time? Do you want to take these separately? What's the will of the group?
Separate.
Okay, so let's take number 1. Okay, so appoint Derek to the Dean of Faculty Hiring Committee. Any motion to approve Derek? Thank you. And any second? Okay, Deborah? Okay, any discussion? Okay, let's try this first. How many would approve this particular appointment? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, so motion carries.
And one abstain.
Okay, and one abstain.
Two.
Okay. By the way, by the advice of our parliamentarian, I'm not going to ask for abstentions, but if people want to ask abstain, you can feel free to raise your hand. Two abstentions. Okay. Okay, number 2, appoint Susie Ling. Any motion to appoint Susie as the co-chair of the, by her request?
So moved.
So moved, okay. Thank you, Tom. And second will be Martha. Okay, any discussion?
Discussion?
Yes.
What if she doesn't find someone to be as a co-chair, I mean, with a co-chair?
Then I don't
She
know.
will be it?
I guess she would be it.
Okay.
She wants a co-chair desperately.
There are people who are.
Some people have already talked to her about possibly doing it. So yeah, but let her know if you want to do it, because she's been recruiting that person.
Okay.
Okay, so any discussion of Susie being the co-chair of this? Yes.
I am aware already of people who, of 2 individuals who are interested, so I don't think we'll wind up with a situation where no one's interested, just for that information.
And again, her request was somebody from natural sciences or from math. But that's we'll see who volunteers. Yes.
For the committee, who is going to be selected for the committee? Because I know some people like this idea, some people don't, and I want to give.
Well, I've had one faculty member from English who's wanted to be on that committee. Deborah Bonstein has already approached me to be on it.
Okay.
But ultimately, this body will decide who's on that committee.
All right.
We will. Okay, yes.
In regarding to all of these committees that are being formed, is there a way that we can prevent this from happening? You just mentioned that one of these committees will be meeting next week. Is that or
the committee for this position for financial aid is meeting? Yeah, I think they're meeting either. So she said as soon as they could meet. Is what she told me today.
Is there a way that we in the future can create a procedure by which there is a time frame, rather than saying we need the committee to be formed by next week, that limits us, and now there's an emergency need. So we can say no committees will be formed within 30 days, 20 days, something of that effect, so that we don't have this.
I don't know if we have the power to do that, though. Well, all we could do is we can determine how we appoint people. We can't tell anybody that they can't form a committee. And we could say that in terms of Senate committees.
Right.
I think we can tell that classified Senate they can't create a committee to hire somebody.
Right, I'm saying, but we are approving these individuals, right?
Yes.
So if let's suppose the academic rank committee came to us and said we need to appoint someone who have a week.
That's different though, that's an academic Senate committee.
Okay, well, so any of these committees right here.
But we would have that.
We would have that. So do we have right now?
Yeah, because what he was using as an example is not an academic Senate committee.
This is a classified position.
Is there one that exists at the moment?
They could meet without a faculty person until we get our person appointed.
Okay. I mean, to give the example that I gave you from today is basically it's a classified position, and there's one faculty by their policy, there's one faculty member on that committee, so that's why Kim came to me asking to appoint that one individual. So I couldn't go to classified and say you can't do this search, I mean, it would be inappropriate. Okay. But we can do that for Senate-related things,
okay.
Yes. Okay. Could I, by the will of the body, do numbers 3 and 4 together, or is there any objection to doing 3 and 4 together?
Did we vote?
No. Oh, we didn't vote on 2, I'm sorry. Oh, okay, we're voting on appointing Susie as the co-chair. So all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Any, no, okay, thank you. So Susie is now the co-chair. Okay, would anybody object to doing 3 and 4 together?
I move that we do 3 and 4 together.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Pat. Okay, so this is appointing Lori and Lenora. All those in, any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so those are done. Okay, let me take number 5 and 6 and discuss this with you. As Pat very wisely pointed out earlier, we've been talking a lot about potential changes to the bylaws, including the possibility of making it clearer about how people are appointed to Senate positions on committees. So with that in mind, basically, I took a look and saw that the bylaws committee has not met in 8 years. And so with that in mind, we need to sort of rebuild that committee. So what the executive committee is recommending is that the executive committee, not including myself, be on that committee. And Carrie and Sheila be on it as well, because their positions are part of what is being considered and changed here. And then, as number 6 says, any 4 other senators, and I did say senators, but it could be senators or their designees, to sit along with those 5 to make changes to the bylaws. So that is the suggestion of the executive committee. But again, we're willing to consider other possibilities as they come up. Yes?
What did you mean by Carrie and Sheila's roles are being?
Because basically, the bylaws will basically be changing the IEC into a voted position, which is not currently, it's an appointed one. So basically, so Sheila's position is being altered, so she obviously should have some say in that. And also, my suggestion is that Carrie's position, not her, but the position, become an advisory vote to the executive committee because she's the C&I chair. That's how it's done at most other campuses. The C&I chair actually sits on most academic senates. And so that's being considered, so she should be there too to make suggestions along those lines too. And so again, we could have more than 4 other senators. That number is just arbitrary. It could be more than 4, it could be 7, it could be 10. So again, we want to have this committee be robust to take a look and see about these kinds of changes. So that's a suggestion of the executive committee. Yes? Yes, please.
What is Sheila Rose's position? I don't.
She is the C&I chair.
I thought Carrie.
I'm sorry, she is the IEC chair. Carrie is the C&I chair.
Thank you.
Yes, Lenore.
So if she's on the committee and you change the bylaws to make this additional VP position, IEC co-chair is now a VP position here, at what point does that take effect? It seems odd to have a current co-chair deliberating her own voting power.
Yeah.
That could go into effect next year if that's the will of the Senate.
Yeah, she would still conflict of interest. I mean, I don't mind their input, but it certainly seems like a conflict of interest for them to be on the committee that's deciding how they're going to get the positions that they currently have.
Okay.
Yeah. I have to agree with that. I know I went along with this at the executive committee, but I don't think any of these people should be on that bylaws committee because they all have a conflict of interest. I think it should be senators at large.
The argument in favor of it is that because we're writing in the duties of the position, so for example, that IEC chair, you would have to have done some specific things on campus to run for it.
Couldn't she be invited in as an advisory participant where she's called in?
Right, sure, but that we may consider that having just to have that formal process there so that people are giving an informed decision about how to revise the bylaws. And I think that was the intention behind the committee, is to say, who knows better what the treasurer's job is than Dan, since he's done it forever. Do you know what I mean? That's why the impetus behind there. So just to give you guys an idea of the understanding behind it. Was to get the
I like that idea, getting their input, but to have them vote on how the bylaw is going to read seems very different and seems to be a major conflict of interest. So I think
the final vote will take place here.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
They won't be making any final
decision. Even the recommendation, they're going to have a lot of say in that recommendation. So anyway.
Yes.
No, I would say that I would imagine that a discussion like this could go on for quite some time with a lot of changes back and forth. I mean, we've seen that with many documents that have been presented to the Senate. So I think it's a good basis for a robust discussion.
So again, this is the suggestion of the executive committee that basically it be these 5 individuals plus 4 more. I'm willing to entertain any kind of amendment to make that number 4 larger. If people want to see that number be larger, it could be the entire Senate having the ability to be on that committee. Whatever is the will of this body is fine. We just want to get that committee together because again, it hasn't met in a while. And by our bylaws, technically, it's defunct. So we need to sort of rebuild it.
I have a question. Who's on there now?
I think that the current...
I mean, how many? How many people?
There's only 3 people on it, or 4 people on it. I can't remember who they are. I think the co-chair was David Arenga. The chair was David Arenga.
Well, could I don't know where to put this in, but personally, I think those people should be invited to continue if they... I mean, granted, the committee hasn't met, but frankly, until recently, there hasn't been any impetus because to do the bylaws, it's a ton of work. It isn't just one little section that you want to address. You need to go through the whole thing and look at ramifications and, so it's not just a quick project. So I would recommend that we do all this, including the 4 more, but also that we contact the people that are on it now and ask them if they would like to continue.
That's great. That's great.
Was that a friendly amendment?
So David Arenga would have to reconvene as the president.
If he so chooses.
Right.
Are you making that a formal amendment?
Friendly.
Well, I don't, well, we don't. We haven't.
It could be a friendly amendment to the first.
Wait, we don't have any motion about 5
I
and
think we
6,
have a motion
do
on
we?
the floor.
Okay.
No. So.
Within that, adding to what Pat says, can we then say that Carrie Starbert's and Sheila Rose's position would be that of advisors only?
If that was an amendment.
If that was an amendment.
So, but yeah, before we can get amendments, we need to have the actual motion on the floor first. So is why don't we take number 5 first? Any motion just to get number 5 on the floor, and then we can entertain any changes anybody wants to make. Okay, thank you, Tom. Any second?
Second.
Okay, Pat. Okay, so any particular changes anybody would like to make to appointing basically the members of the executive committee and Carrie and Sheila to this committee? Yes.
Okay, my recommendation is that the members of the executive committee and Sheila and Carrie be advisors only, and not nobody.
Is there any second to that?
Second.
Okay. Okay, so let's take a vote on the amendment first. Any discussion of that amendment to make them all advisory members? Okay. Okay, so all those in favor of making these members advisory members, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, can I see a show of hands? How many people support making them advisories? Okay, opposed? Okay, so that motion carries.
Abstaining.
Okay, abstaining. Okay, so back to the original motion now. They're going to be appointed as advisory members. All those in favor of appointing them as advisory members? Oh, sorry, discussion?
Yes, I wanted to also amend it to include the present members of the bylaws committee who wish to remain.
As advisory members?
No.
Oh, you want to save it
for save that for number
sorry,
6.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay, so all those in, well, any discussion of number 5 as amended? As amended? Yes? Okay.
No, actually, it's not an appropriate.
Okay. Okay, so all those in favor of appointing these as advisory members, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so they are appointed. Okay, so now number 6. Let's just get the motion on the floor first. The request for 4 more senators to serve on this committee, because again, it hasn't met in a while and it's very small. So any particular, yes, please.
I move.
As follows? As,
yes.
Okay. Any second? Okay, thank you. Okay, any discussion?
A discussion? Oh,
Sure.
sorry, Pat. I'd just like to see if we can, how many people are there currently? You said, Pat, there's 3?
There's 4 as far as I remember.
There's 4, and then
Well,
we
let's
would-
just say the present members of the committee, since we're not very clear right now on how many that is. Let's just say the present members of the bylaws committee.
Will be invited to continue.
Will be invited to remain on the committee.
I just want to see how many people we're going to end up having there. So if we have 5 that are advisors, and then so that when we had 4, then there's going to be more advisors than actual senators.
That's true.
No, because, well, I want to put in there about the current ones would be in addition to these 4.
In addition to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's make that clear. Are you amending right now?
But you don't,
Okay.
you don't need.
You don't need the amendment. 4 more from what
They
we
are
already have.
already members.
They're already
They're already
members.
there, so
I
you're
know,
just-
but I think, all right, no, I think
Yeah.
what I'm thinking, maybe what Eduardo's thinking, I meant that the current members of the bylaw committee should continue, but we should also try to find 4 more Senate members to serve on this bylaws committee.
That's what it says.
Yes, that's what it
So
says.
you don't need to amend
So
anything.
we're adding 4 to the ones who are already there. It's nobody's fired the 4.
Well, I'm just trying to make it very clear that the current ones are indeed going to be there.
Clarifying what we're voting on.
Yeah.
We're voting on adding 4
More new
more
members.
members to the current
Committee.
established committee.
Right.
That
Thank
is chaired by David Aronga.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay?
Okay, that's
Just
correct.
clarification.
So there'd be 8.
Okay, so the motion's on the floor.
7 or 8.
they'll
Any
need
further
them.
discussion?
I'd like to increase number to 5.
5, okay.
Yeah, to make it 9.
Any
Make it a
second on
odd number.
making it to 5? Thank you. Okay, so let's vote on making it 5 first. All those in favor of making it 5, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, all opposed? Okay, so it's 5. Okay, let's go back to the original motion to appoint 5 members of this body to serve alongside the 4 people who are currently there. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so now the committee will be added. If you'd like to be one of those 5, please let us know by next Monday. Okay, we'll be taking it. Our goal is to get more than 5 to try to get a diversity from various divisions. That's what we'll be looking for. Yes.
So what are you going to do with those names then? How are we going to?
We'll discuss them and then we'll figure out which 4 or 5, which 5 we will bring forward based on diversity of various divisions. Yes.
I would like to extend the deadline rather than this coming Monday, but the following Monday, because I'm going to have to talk to as many people as I can within our division. And with the schedule that I have and getting people together and meet, it'll be difficult to talk to as many people as possible to get a wide group of candidates.
So you want to be beyond the 22nd?
Yes, please.
Wait.
Yes,
You mean the
Canal,
22nd,
Oh.
not the 15th.
So I was going to say, because then we wouldn't be able to vote on it at the next academic senate meeting if we wait that long.
That's
So
right.
might we do it on like the Wednesday?
They won't. It's
Right.
either
Could be Wednesday.
one-on-one. With our division, yeah, it's a lot
I
easier.
know,
Yeah.
but this isn't.
It says senators here. So it will be these people here in this room.
Yeah, but that's what's being discussed as though.
No, because, but he did say or designees.
Or designate.
Well, do you mean any faculty senators, which
We have
everybody
a
is,
handout.
or just the ones on the board?
Yeah.
The intention was the Senate board, but it
Yeah.
is pretty vague in the wording
We
there.
have a handout.
Yes,
What do we mean by the word senators? Does that mean that we cannot go back to our divisions?
you can. It was senator or designee.
Or designee.
Or designee.
All right.
Yes, Katie.
Clarification. If those people that are currently serving on the committee decide perhaps that they don't want to serve on that committee anymore, then would we also be filling those positions?
What's the sense of the body?
Yes.
Fill them?
Yes.
Increase the number?
So
Okay.
they need to notify us. I mean, they would need to notify us.
Well, I can call each one of them individually. I will call each one of them individually.
So I'm guessing by the 17th is the date.
So basically, yeah, the day that the agenda needs to go out is, well, we usually do it, right, Judy, on Thursday before. So I would say I say Thursday at noon, but really it's more like Thursday at 10. So just, if you like to serve, let us know, ideally by next Monday, or even today, that you'd like to be on the list. And if you have until, ideally Monday, well, technically all the way until Wednesday or Thursday, to let us know. Yes?
I'm not a senator, but I would be on the committee as a designation. Will I volunteer myself now?
Just have a senator basically sponsor you to be on it.
Okay.
Yes?
I hereby sponsor.
Okay, just come up to me at the meeting. Okay?
He is a senator.
Yes.
We don't want to take care of it in the middle of the meeting.
Yes.
All right, so if I understand this right, the deadline is, because I wanted to extend it, and so we're extending it by 2 days from the
Yeah.
15th to
Basically, it
the
will be
17th?
3 days.
3 days, okay.
And the reason why is because we only have 3 meetings before the end of the year, and we would need to make all the things that Crystal presented on work. We need to have some of this basically, because we have to have our elections, right, for the new position, so
Well,
it
we
has to
still-
be done
we-
within a certain time frame.
But we haven't even agreed on what Crystal had to say.
Right, well, that's why we need to discuss it, to figure out if it's going to.
And that's why the bylaws have to meet first.
That's why the
to decide
bylaws
if
have
we're
to
gonna
figure out
have
if it's going to make changes or not. So we can let Crystal know.
But
Yes?
This is a committee that's gonna go on for a long time, it's gonna make very important decisions, and to rush choosing who the people that are gonna be on this, when we don't have time to get the calendar on there, I mean, it just seems to me that our priorities are a little messed up here. I mean, what is it gonna matter if we wait one more meeting? The calendar isn't gonna matter if we wait one more meeting, and that's gonna happen in January. So, I personally think we should delay it a little longer.
Also,
Yeah.
also I'm a little disturbed by what you just said. In order to hurry up and do this so that we can accommodate what Crystal just presented to us. That's a very disturbing statement.
Well, I mean, basically,
This is just a discussion.
if we're going to create a new vice president, we need to let the groups that are working on this know so they can rewrite the policies to let them, to make that kind of change. Or if we're not going to do it, we need to let them know so they cannot make the
Rewritten
changes.
by one person.
Right.
Nor has the shared governance committee of this body even looked at that proposal. Or seen any kind of, policy revision from that proposal. We have a body in this, a committee in this body to deal with shared governance issues. I haven't seen anything, so I don't feel the rush to accommodate.
Well, let's see
a
when
plan
the
that
bylaw
is
committee get
discussed.
together. We'll proceed accordingly.
As part of the bylaw committee, what they do is, how do we determine which areas have how many senators in that, or is there, because it seems to be a lot out of sync these days.
That's my sense of it.
Visual arts and media studies, I counted our faculty, we have 69, we have 1 member. I think it was social sciences has 37, and they have 2 members.
Yolanda, I'll be glad, I don't know a whole lot, but I'll be glad to go over the bylaws. It's in there about full-time. It specifies the number here is based on your full-time. I'll be glad, though, to go over
But
it
it
with
still
you.
seems skewed because we
I know,
just
but I'll be
got-
glad to take some time.
Well, I agree, Yolanda. That's my sense looking at it myself. That it's out of sync.
And I think
that's
that's
what
why
the committee can look at.
And that's why this came up out of.
Okay, I do want to, that basically that sort of item is pretty much sort of complete, but I will make a couple more comments before we look at number 7. And number 7, I'm really curious to see where people stand on number 7. So please go ahead, Tom, first.
I'm still on number 6, though.
Yes.
6 has been approved.
On the date for
6 has been approved.
appointing these senators or the 4 people, the bylaws committee, why can't we delay that until the 5th, which would give our representatives a chance to talk to whoever might be interested in doing that without being in a great rush?
Okay.
I mean, I know there's time restraints on some of this stuff, but I don't see where I could possibly talk to everybody I would need to talk to see if they were interested in the time frame that you're giving me.
Okay, let's make it a November 5th.
So can we make it do we have to make a motion on that, or
No.
can we just generally agree
It's
that
done.
it'll be on the 5th?
It's the 5th.
Okay, cool.
Okay, yes.
What days were so one question we asked, what days will the committee meet?
That will be the decision of the committee, once
Okay.
the committee
So
starts
nothing
meeting.
is set, okay.
No, there's no, obviously the committee has not met in 8 years, so.
Okay.
They need to sort of figure
Okay,
that
I'll
out.
get paid.
I
Okay.
think, wait,
Yes.
I think it does have to be a motion since we approved the bylaws.
That is
and
true.
appointed,
Okay,
so it does-
I will entertain a motion to make it November 5th, so Tom, please.
I
and Martha.
move that we make the date November 5th for appointing our members for the bylaws committee. Is that?
Okay, that's
Second.
fair.
Correct?
Second. Okay, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so it's November 5th. Okay, number 7. As you can see, there was a reconfiguration of the room today. And it's the sense of the executive committee, as we discussed last Monday, that this room is starting to become a bit of a logistical issue in terms of sort of the separation between the table and the chairs. Now, it's a little better today, I hope. But there's a sense that basically people feel like the more important people sit here and the less important people sit back
The
there.
rowdy ones are
The
back
rowdy
there.
ones are
But that's true.
And so, now, basically, we didn't make any decisions. I want to make that very clear. All Judy and I did was reserve the Circadian on October 22nd. Okay, just because that room is very much in demand on this campus. So we went to Marcy and we just made a reservation. I spoke to Marcy. We can very easily pull it based on the vote that happens here today. But we'd like to do a test meeting in the Circadian next 2 weeks from today. With basically all senators sitting at a larger table. Judy and I have worked on a configuration of the room to sort of make it work. We think that it would actually lead to a more sense of equality in the room. There would be a sense that all senators were clearly there. There would be a podium for people to come up and make comments. The room's acoustics are a little better, in my opinion. So we just wanted to do it as a test. No decisions about moving meetings permanently is going to be made anytime at this particular meeting or even necessarily at that meeting. But we just like to run it by you as a possibility. Again, I can go to Marcy and I can pull it if the group says no. But I just wanted it to sort of see if you'd like to try a meeting over there, especially since in my first look through the bylaws, based on what Yolanda's talked about, I think we have to expand the number of senators. I think we just really need to do that. So more clear representation takes place. And if we have more senators, this room is just too small. That room is sort of larger and will allow us to have a more clear meeting space for all of the senators to sit. So I'm willing to sort of see what the body, I don't know what the body's going to decide on this. Again, no decision's been made about moving the meeting yet, so we're about to make it now. So again, if you have any opinions, let us know now. Okay, so Tom, please go ahead.
I move that we determine whether or not we want to do a test meeting site.
Any second?
We do have to have a motion on this, right?
We do.
Okay, I move that we have a test meeting in the security.
Okay, any second on that? Okay, Yolanda. Okay, any discussion of this? Yes, Eduardo.
I've had meetings with the Enrollment Management Committee, and I didn't like the way we were configured, so I would vote yea or nay depending on the configuration. The way we were, it's kind of like if you've been to the Board of Trustees meetings, you got the big U shape, and then the other people that wanted in the public, they're way over there. So there's more separation and there's more us
That's
versus
why we're
them.
voting on a test meeting.
Well, what I'm saying is, if we're going to do this, why not do it right way so that we don't have that? That's what I'm saying. We need to configure in such a manner that we're all more inclusive. Because if we do it the way it currently stands, it's already a no. It's not going to work.
Yes, Dan.
Dustin, is your idea to have a big table and have everybody seated at the table?
The idea is to have every senator sitting at the table.
Okay, I think that's what we want. Okay.
And the way that we worked it with Marcy, every senator would sit at the table.
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. Yes.
I still want my peanut gallery. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
With peanuts included, right? Okay. Well, I guess, yes. Okay, all those, let's just take a vote. All those in favor of doing a test meeting at the Circadian on the 22nd, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. I'm surprised. Okay. Okay, with the indulgence of the body, I actually supposed to do this a little earlier. Penella basically would like to do a presentation on the Brown Act. I just want to let you know, we had invited Mary Dow to come and sort of answer any questions about the Brown Act, but basically after speaking to her, she thought it was best that she not be here, so it's just going to be Penella that's going to do this. Okay, so Penella, whenever you're ready.
Put that in the record.
Who is she? I don't know. I think she's one of them. From the administrative offices.
Destin, who is Mary Gallo?
She is the Board of Trustees lawyer.
We want a piece of that.
All right, Chris. While it's put on here that I'm going to talk about the Brown Act, I'm only really doing what was asked by a couple of senators, which are, especially for those of us who maybe missed the Senate retreat or are new reps for the Academic Senate. A lot of things have been happening in the last 2 meetings that are totally out of procedure, process, and policy. And it's not for your fault, it's just because we haven't had a chance really to do what we call an orientation, right? Like with most new jobs, you have to do some kind of, hey, how does this work? My goal today is in a very short time, because I know it's the late hour, to go over a couple of things. Quickly, what does it mean to be a senator? What does our process look like? And a little bit about the Brown Act. I'm gonna put some more in-depth information up on the website, so if you have questions about things like the Brown Act, the shortest, best version discussion of the Brown Act is still 7 pages long, right? So the stuff that I would want to go into, it would take a full meeting and training to discuss, and I know that you have important work to do, so please bear with me as we go through this. So, do you guys remember this great TV show called Schoolhouse Rocks? Yeah. Right? It was the best. And remember how there was that wonderful episode that was like, what is a bill? Right? And I was like, I'm not going to sing it for you, but right, next time. Or after 2 beers in a couple of minutes. So now, one of the things we start to look at is this is going to be a kind of rigorous process when we talk about how Academic Senate and anything moving through Academic Senate works. So, first thing that we start to see is what is Academic Senate? Oh, sons of mothers. All right, so now, one of the things we start to see is the basic 10+1, right?
There we go.
Fantastic, right? Just what you needed. Get cozy, especially in the peanut gallery,
Stand by
right?
the window.
Right? So, when we look at the 10+1, this is what Academic Senate is supposed to be covering. This is in your Academic Senate packets. It's what we've been talking about. These are the really 11 goals and charges of what Academic Senate is supposed to do. This was not decided here at PCC. This is decided by the California state government. This is our charge under the law. Now, you all know these, and these are clearly things that we start to have committees around. So what does it mean to have a degree and certificate program, educational program development, the role of governance structures, faculty roles and involvement around annual reports, accreditation, etc. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because we already know that. What I'm more concerned about is a little bit about what we've been talking about, which is the selection and process to be a senator. Now, from what I can tell, based at least on, I would say, anecdotal evidence from talking to all of you, is that the policy and procedures around what you do in your divisions might be different than what you are supposed to do in your divisions. And part of it is because we haven't revised our bylaws in a while. The first thing is that you're supposed to have clear nominations and elections for all of your Senate reps and their alternates. This should be documented, right? Who voted for who. And it should be submitted to the Academic Senate, which means that at a division meeting, right, you would have clearly voted on this process. So if you are here, I'm going to assume that after a robust and vigorous discussion like we just had for the committee process, everybody, at least a simple majority in your division, selected you. I am not sure that's true, as I hear some silence in the room. But that's the process that you were supposed to go through. The idea is once you have been voted in, it's your job no longer to represent your individual voice. Rather, you become a representative of your division. Meaning, we discuss things here, right? You go back to your division, you talk to every single faculty member that you can get a hold of, and try to get their opinion so that you can best vote the way that you think your division would like to be represented. Now, for some folks, hold on, right? That's my peanut gallery in the back, right? For some folks, that might mean that you've established some kind of like email correspondence where you can kind of go back through and filter out who told you what. For others of you, you may be doing this in a more analog way where you have a roster of faculty that you then go through and check off when you met with them. But you're supposed to go through some kind of more formal process. Then, your goal is having gone through, coming to the meetings, going back, discussing with your division what's been happening, you get to come and vote the will of your division based on discussion, right? Now, this is important because some of us come from particularly larger divisions. So as we heard earlier, saying, hey, I need to take, I'm in something like social sciences, right? I got a robust amount of people. Hey, can we hold off on a discussion for another meeting because I got to talk to a lot of people? No problem. As long as we're facilitating the process of you being able to go through. Now, I will say that at some academic senates, they actually require you to submit what your division has voted on. So, being clear and transparent starts with us, right, as the senators. Are we going back and talking to everyone? So here's what happens once an item comes up to academic senate. You have to start to say, all right, so now we have this meeting, right, that we meet every 2 weeks. We have a clear charge, meaning the 10+1 that's come down from the state of California. And now how do we make decisions about what is going to happen here at PCC? This is where the process takes a very long time. It is like turning a yacht. Nothing happens quickly here, right, in terms of this democratic process. What happens for us first is some type of proposal is introduced. As you have already seen, a faculty member can come to the academic senate meeting and say, hey, we would like to talk about something like the plus or minus grading policy. Fantastic. The academic senate can then take that, charge a committee to investigate, research, look at what's going to happen, right? And the committee, the item will go to a committee. Now let me be clear about what a committee is. On our campus, we got all kinds of committees for everything, right? We got committees to decide calendar, committees for academic senate, we got committees to decide where committees go. It's called College Council. It's like the sorting hat on campus for anybody who knows Harry Potter, right? We have committees all over the place. When we talk about shared governance committees are committees that come out of the College Council, meaning that they have representatives from management, students, classified, and faculty. That's what shared governance means for a shared governance committee. For us, we have an academic senate committee, right? That means that it only has to be faculty. It is not a shared governance committee. It is a faculty-driven committee. Now, much like the plus or minus grading policy, that's going to go to faculty, right? There won't be student input, right? There necessarily won't be classified input. It will go straight to faculty, the people who will be in charge of administering this policy. What then starts to happen is once the committee is met, they start to make some ideas about what they would like to recommend. Those recommendations come back as an information item, right? Hey folks, this is what's been going on in our committee. How are you doing? As a representative, it would be your job then to go back to your division and talk to them about the findings of this committee. Now, notice at this part, just to get to this, if we were to look at it based on an academic senate timeline, meaning we meet every 2 weeks, it takes at least 6 weeks to get information started, assuming that the minute the proposal comes in, that your committee meets that week. So nothing is fast here, right? So I hear this moment when we say we're trying to rush to get things on the agenda, it's because even to just get it on an agenda is a 2-week away possibility, right? So now, you present it first as an information item, right? We go away, we talk to our divisions, we come back. The first time we come back, right, this is where we start to do things like make amendments. Hey, I talked to my division about this plus or minus grading policy, and we have concerns about X. Can the committee come up and address X? Hopefully, if the committee chair feels comfortable, they can answer in the meeting, but sometimes they don't, right? They want to take a chance to go back and check in with their committee to make sure that they're really expressing the will of committee. It will then go back to committee, right, to make any kinds of additions. Then we come back for the second round. Now I say second round, but as you have seen, policy, as with everything else, is a living document. It changes based on the times, the circumstances, and what's going on campus. So when we say there is a second read, the second read is where we might choose to take a vote. But if the body is not satisfied with what's being presented, it can go back to committee. So when we see proposals on campus, especially the first time, and trust me, I understand, it's really easy to go, oh my God, this is not going to happen right now, oh my God, you can't do this. Nothing can happen right now in Academic Senate, right? As you've seen, just to get the first read takes at least 6 weeks. So it takes a substantial amount of time, right? And notice the process is you as a senator go back to your division, you talk to all of your faculty and check in about these amendments, right? Assuming that we feel good about the document, what will then happen is in this meeting, we vote on saying, hey, this is fantastic, let's go ahead and move forward with that policy. Now, one of the things that I want to be clear on, because this is something that we have not been really good about, is how we debate a policy. When we talk about debating a policy, there are a couple of things. One is that we tend to follow Robert's Rules of Order, which is a fantastic book if you're looking for some bedtime reading, right? But the basics, for those of you who do not want to be involved with the minutia, we have a parliamentarian who will keep us on track, and we have Simon Fraser who will keep us on track, right? But the basics that I like to remind us of is the stuff that you learned in kindergarten. One person speaks at a time. Please raise your hand and wait to be called on, right? And try to limit side conversation, right? The idea is that we want to and value everybody's opinion, and we want to be able to hear it. At the same time, when I say one item at a time, what I mean is we're really only talking about the specific issue. So one of the things that's happened lately in our meetings is people try to go back to a topic that we've already covered. That's kind of out of order. And it's not uncommon on for many people who follow Robert's rules for the chair to slam down the gavel, say that's out of order, and stop the conversation, right? I don't think anybody here likes that, but what I would rather have us do is stick to and follow the agenda as we move through, so that way we're having a more robust and meaningful discussion, right? Now, the next thing that I want to remind folks is this idea of being courteous. Particularly because we're a collegial faculty body, it's easy to get really involved in what I call evaluative language versus descriptive language. Evaluative language is assuming that just because somebody disagrees with you, that their entire being is wrong and they should die instantaneously, right? Rather, what we would want to do is focus on the description of the process, particularly because many of us share students, right? A lot of times, if we come in and we assume that a faculty member is a certain way, we go out, we run into a student, we say, oh my God, I cannot believe what so-and-so said. We forget that those students will then go to you later on, right, and say, you know what, I heard you did at a meeting, right? So being courteous is not just because we want to build a good faculty body, but also because sometimes there's backfire with our students, and we certainly wouldn't want them to be part of that, right? So even if you don't agree with the faculty member, you can agree that we all have our student success in mind. So now, the next thing. The next thing that you've heard bandied about, and maybe some of you know and maybe some of you don't know, is this thing called the Brown Act, right? The Brown Act was passed, Simon, what year?
1950-something.
Well done. So the Brown Act came out in 1953. So while many people think that it is a new, sunshining of governance, no. This has been around for quite a bit. And the idea is that what we want to have is a way to make sure that decision-making bodies, right, recommendation-making bodies follow a clear process that allows access. So let me be clear how it functions here at PCC. We have folks like the Academic Senate, right? This body. Academic Senate is a Brown Act regulated body on campus. However, the committees underneath them are not Brown Act unless they choose to be, right? Unless they choose to be. Now, as you heard Crystal say earlier, that doesn't mean that our committees don't tell you where they're meeting or that they don't post agendas or do things like that. That's certainly not the process. But what it does do is force Academic Senate to do a couple of things. Things like posting our agenda 72 hours in advance, right? This is one of the reasons why you'll hear Dustin say we have to get some things moved on the agenda because we have to have it posted at a certain time. Once the agenda is posted, it's a little bit harder, although not impossible, to change the agenda, but the idea is that we want to have it up and ready to go so that you can, and members of the college community can find out what we're discussing and where we're discussing it and when we're discussing it. Does that make sense to everybody? Mm-hmm. Now notice, on our campus, our shared governance bodies are Brown Act, but many of our committees are not in Academic Senate. So I want to clarify that a little bit because I have heard rumors where people will say, oh my God, I heard that this committee is going to recommend this and it violates the Brown Act. And I've heard it from very good, smart people who know better. And they're wrong, right? That's not how that process works, right? When we talk about the Brown Act is what governs our larger structure, not necessarily those working meetings. So now, the thing that I want to remind us all, right, is that clearly democracy is a long process, and I know that I'm talking to a bunch of folks who are here and excited to participate, but it's also one that requires us having this moment of process and procedure. I think, and I hope that this has been a good reminder for everyone, that there is a clear procedure to follow, and hopefully you'll be able to follow that to the best of your ability. With that, thank you very much. This has just been a quick overview. If you want to get the lights, I see a hand up. Okay, go for it.
Would you do us a favor and present this to our president? I'll go as a moral support person.
Yes.
I think somebody needs to remind our powers that be that there is a process. And they really do need to be reminded.
I agree with you. That's
not that it would do any good, but at least we
that's why I really wish we had been able to present a formal statement today about with the students and with the management around shared governance, because I think that that process is so important. Yeah, Yolanda.
Although we're primarily, we are voted in and then we represent and vote, we are allowed to have faculty-wide votes if we feel it's necessary.
Absolutely. And then thank you for reminding me that. That's something that I forgot in there. And then on some, usually on larger, more major issues, we can, as a body, choose to do, like we suggested earlier on the calendar, having a survey or vote of the full faculty. Yeah.
I have a question about voting. So as from the library, I represent the library, and I talk about books amongst my peeps and come back and vote. So what about the officers? Dan is from the library, so is he also, are all of you also not you, Dustin, but the three of you, how does that play out?
So we are representatives of the whole body, right? So that's why if you guys have seen me coming around to your divisions a little bit more than you probably have seen me in the past, and I've been trying to hoof it around to talk to everybody, that's the general idea, is that we representatives based on everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not supposed to represent our individual
divisions anymore.
Which is why we have office hours, encouraging people from all over campus to come and tell us so that we can represent the entire faculty.
Thank you.
So I saw Simon's hand and then
I'll just for faculty.
Thank you. Okay, board.
Is the term to say we're elected for once a year, so every year our divisions should hold elections to re-elect or appoint someone else?
Yep.
Okay, just one.
That's how it's that's what the bylaws say.
Every year.
Right? So, Danny.
So, and the subcommittees can vote to follow the Brown Act rules.
That's what I said. As I said, they are welcome to, although we don't currently have them to. And part of that, too, is because you all have sat on committees sometimes. And you know how sometimes somebody gets sick, so you say, we'll just push the meeting a week. Or, oh, maybe you're the chair of the committee and you didn't get your agenda done quite in 72 hours. You got it done like 72 minutes before your committee meeting started, right? If you followed the Brown Act, suddenly you would be a much more accountable faculty chair. So this allows for some flexibility sometimes in those working committees to allow for some real work to get done, right? So.
When I put up my agendas for my city, I was told 72 hours.
Mm-hmm. It's, again, it's recommended,
and
right?
it is, you know, particularly because we are preparing policy for a vote in this body, which is covered by the Brown Act.
Mm-hmm.
So because we're preparing policy for this body, it is essentially functioning like the Brown Act.
Although we don't have to, right? And I'll let Simon go.
The reason that the only reason that the Academic Senate and the Associated Students and the Classical Senate and Management Association are covered by the Brown Act is because the Board of Trustees of this college is governed by the Brown Act. The Brown Act says that a governing legislative body of a local agency, in this case either a city or a county or school board government, must be covered by this law. What happens is that those instruments, either the City Council or our Board of Trustees, when they create subcommittees that have at least more of a quorum or that are formally established by their policies, in those instances, those bodies are covered by the Brown Act. There was a question over why these groups are then, and that's because of an Attorney General's opinion that was issued in July of 1984, which states that the Academic Senate, among other subsidiary groups, are covered by the Brown Act because our functions, respectively, are to advise the governing board on the Title V AB 1725 regulations.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why the shared governance groups and some of the committees of the Board of Trustees are covered by the Brown Act, but not the subsidiary committees of the shared governance groups necessarily. That, although, depends on your own bylaws, because sometimes, for example, the Associated Students, we've written into our bylaws that our committees will do that. The committees didn't have a choice, but our rules forced them to do that, not the Brown Act itself.
Right. And again, another reason for us to look at the bylaws. Welcome to the theme of the day, right? Say the magic word, get it up, correct? So
with the subcommittees, there's a difference between voting to be a Brown Act committee and voting to follow the Brown Act rules. And so if you vote to follow the Brown Act rules, you really don't incur any of the legal liabilities of doing a Brown Act committee.
that's actually not quite right, Danny, but I like where you're going with it. The one thing that I also want to say is the Brown Act really is about openness, transparency, and kind of the process, but I do want to admit that a lot about an academic senate, because it's not a shared governance space, it's really a faculty working committee, that a lot of times we might want to not have it necessarily follow the rigorous kind of agendized process of a Brown Act so that we can also be a little bit more conversational. So let me give you an example with a topic that you all love, the calendar, right? Your favorite topic, everyone's favorite topic on campus, right? Which is, if we were to discuss it, right, how we discuss it in the process of, say, an agendized item at Academic Senate would be very different than how we might discuss it, for example, in the FA, right? The FA could also choose to go by an agendized process, but it's much more conversational, right? And that's partly because you don't adhere to the agendized process of the Brown Act. So sometimes it allows us to have a more robust discussion in committee work when we're trying to banter around ideas and figure out and go through kind of, especially for my folks who believe in a creative process, right? We're trying to do that. It sometimes allows for a little bit more creativity in that process, which is why we want that to be not so regulated sometimes in committee work, but highly regulated when we get to the recommendation work. And that's the idea behind the Brown Act, is to kind of allow for folks to negotiate that. Right? Simon?
So I just have a question. You listed the 10+1 up there, and you mentioned the plus-minus committee that you guys have.
Yes.
Faculty process. Well, I've been very, sort of pushing my shared governance, right? So my 9+1. And one of those is grading policy, which basically are the same as your 10+1, except a little less rigorous. So how does the Academic Senate, in its process, include, because while there is a remark relied primarily upon for certain things, there is still a requirement of the governing board to consult collegially with the Associated Students, specifically on grading policies and the minus plus minus. So how does the Academic Senate plan to make sure that those other responsibilities are met and not just its own. That's a great process, right? So, do you want to cover it, or am I okay?
Basically, if I understand your question correctly, when this particular committee had any recommendation ready, my recommendation to that committee chair, to Susie, and whoever is the co-chair with her, would be to take it as to an agenda item to the AS for discussion, before it was ever even voted here.
Okay. So then what would happen is we would get make sure that faculty felt good about it, and then shop it around to the bodies that have a vested interest in it.
Okay.
And that's how it is for most of those committee processes.
I guess I want to make sure that the faculty, the academic senate realizes, and I'm sure that you guys do, there are other shared governance groups on campus.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. Any other questions before we move on? Thank you all for going for this Senate Advising 101. I really appreciate you taking the time at this late hour. If you have any questions, feel free to, of course, harass me or come by during my office hours.
Thank you, Phil. Okay. Next, again, I'm sort of moving the information items up to save the reports for last because they're going to be all brief. Is the Ad Hoc Committee on Faculty Governance. I think they have a presentation. This is an information item, not a voting item. So Valerie, whenever you I think you have an actual document here to look at as well.
This is what happens when you have too much fun on the weekends.
All right, I know it's late, I'm sorry. My name's Valerie. I'm here to talk about Task Team 3. The document in front of you is a draft of a policy that Task Team 3 was charged with creating. Mind you, it is just a draft. We're in the phase where we're asking for revisions from all the senators and the faculty that they represent. I've circulated the document, and it is a bit overwhelming at this point. There are lots of information, lots of details, and I think it obscures really what the Task Team 3 intended to happen. And so I put together this short show for a presentation to really convey a little bit of the history of what's been going on with Task Team 3 and what our intentions were, so you were better prepared at making revisions to the document. So Task Team 3 was formed last spring after Task Teams 1 and 2 had met. I'm assuming I'm not going to go over all the details of that, but Task Teams 1 and 2 basically were formed in response to accreditation. They were discussing an interim plan and also gathering research to figure out faculty organizational models. Task Team 3 was composed of these members. Again, we met over the summer, so a lot of people were asked to be on this committee but declined because of the summer work involved. So our objectives basically are to define a set of guidelines for faculty which describes a process. Okay, and keep that in mind. These guidelines are describing a process, not a cookie cutter outcome that everybody has to adopt per se. So this process would be to create a permanent organizational structure below the dean level. Okay? So deans and above are administration purview. Anything that involves faculty below the dean is not administration and would be our purview. So that is really what our team objective was. And then we would draft a proposal, basically, that would be reviewed by the greater body of faculty, and it would be up for discussion. So just a brief history of why we started this process and when the process actually began. We got visited by the accreditation team April 2010, and basically we were issued a warning on this campus for a number of reasons. This link here is to the whole accreditation process. I would encourage you to look at those documents to read what's been happening since 2010, so you have some insight on where we need to go when the accreditation team comes back and visits us.
Excuse me?
Yes.
So what does the accreditation team say regarding the necessity for this?
So a major area of improvement, thank you.
It's like you're a plant of the administration. It's that.
A major area, there were multiple areas for improvement. A major one, though, is to link the educational master plan student success outcomes to programs, assess them and implement them, making improvements as necessary. I highlight this particular recommendation, this particular area, because faculty have the most control over this one, whereas the others, you can read about them, are more administration and organizational recommendations. If you were interested in the exact wording of the recommendation, it is this. So this is recommendation 2. I'm not going to read it, but I would direct your attention to this last statement. The team further recommends that student learning outcomes assessment be incorporated into the program review, program planning, and resource allocation processes. The reason that I'm directing your attention to that statement is because there are lots of other things that have been going on in this campus before our task team met to remedy these issues. So one of the preliminary concerns I've heard is this. And I want to note that this is not being mandated by the document that Task Team 3 has created. This is already happening. As I'll discuss shortly, we're aligning this document with other things that happen on campus to avoid redundancy. Now, this is a little difficult to see with the lights on, but this is an org chart that represents some of those other things that have been going on around campus. You've heard about the instruction or the Institutional Effectiveness Committee. This is the main committee that's been formed to make sure that program review is up to standard when the accreditation team comes back. And so the whole campus is supposed to organize itself around this committee. You can see here, we're instruction. Right here, there's student support services, student and learning services, and administrative functions. So pretty much these 3 boxes here are feeding into this evidence and data box, which means that we have to be aware of our program goals, what we're doing, how we're serving students, and we need to create data for that. We just can't say that it's happening. And that data is then going to be processed by the Institutional Effectiveness Committee. That's going to be tied to resource allocation, your basic skills transfers, general education. And so this is the whole thing. This is what the accreditation team is going to look like. Okay, so this policy really is to get faculty and support services involved in this cycle. And I might mention that faculty aren't aware of a lot of this stuff. Okay, some of the senators I talked to aren't aware of some of these things, and so it is really pertinent that we do educate our colleagues. In addition, our action is timely. I'm not saying that we need to rush this. That's not obviously a popular statement, but I want to remind you that we've been talking about this for over a year. Task Teams 1 and 2 met last fall, and the accreditation committee is coming back. And actually, if you read this statement, it says this is a letter that was written by the commission, and it expects these things to be shown to them by fall 2012. So we're behind. We're behind schedule. Task Teams 1 and 2 took a long time discussing the things that they had to discuss, and so time is of the essence. Do we need to take questions now?
No, you can do it after.
Okay, I'll take questions. Can you hold your question, Martha, till after, and so maybe it'll get answered. So this policy is, again, meant to define common guidelines that faculty can use, independent of the administrative framework or support that they currently receive. You know, we don't know what's going to go on at the administrative level. We need to organize ourselves. The policy also will return power to faculty in terms of program planning. So a few years ago, I talked to Dorothy. A lot of that was done at sort of the administrative level. There were area plans, institutional plans, that sort of thing. I don't know a whole lot about it. But this is going to give faculty the power over their own planning process and their own programs. Also, it's meant to provide support. So also what I've heard is a lot of faculty do not feel supported in all of these changes that are going on around campus. And this document really is meant to support faculty so that they can meet the standards associated with the program review process that the accreditation team is going to look at. Now, our guiding principles as we were generating this document are these. This is the main crux of the whole presentation, because I feel that the policy document doesn't really convey the heart that went into this committee work, and I just like to put these principles forward so that if the document doesn't convey them, then we need to have a discussion of how to change the language so that it does. Okay, these are things that were very important to the committee, very important to students that we talked to, very important to faculty who made up task teams 1 and 2. So one, first and foremost, is improving student success as outlined in the Educational Master Plan. Next, we used the research that was completed by task teams 1 and 2. They did a lot of excellent work. And we wanted to create an adaptable process. Again, we did not want to create a cookie-cutter thing that everyone had to do. So this is a really policy about process so that everyone can decide a model that would meet their variable needs, because they differ from division to division. Also, we wanted to improve interdisciplinary communication. This was another sort of issue with accreditation. Currently, we work in these silos, and there isn't a whole lot of communication going on between disciplines. This may work for faculty, but if you're really thinking about how a student experiences life at PCC, it is not vertically, it's horizontally. And we really, as faculty, if we want to better serve students, we need to think about that horizontal movement and really communicate more between disciplines. Also, again, we wanted to align this process with existing committees and policy so that we weren't creating something else that you had to do, because we're all very busy. And finally, we really want this policy to be as inclusive as possible. Okay? We don't want to isolate anybody, we don't want to exclude anybody, we want to make it so that all the faculty feel that this process can work for them and their particular needs. So again, if these ideas were not conveyed, it wasn't malintent, it's just that it was a draft and we're asking that you provide revisions so that we can make it better. I do have some examples of working groups that could be formed by this policy. I don't know if that's appropriate to talk about those now. People interested in seeing that? Okay. I'd have to.
I say we have 1 minute.
to exit this. Okay, like I said, this outlines a process. So the outcomes, there could be numerous outcomes. The font on this is difficult to see, but basically this proposal is asking that faculty organize themselves into working groups of 8 to 12. Thank you.
Find the right one.
Yeah. So faculty would organize themselves into groups of 8 to 12 people, and they would be organized around some outcome, some student success outcomes. So again, that can vary. It could be cultural identity, it could be a program, it could be a pathway, it could be a block, it could be whatever you're involved in on campus that pertains to classes. You would organize around that central theme, and then there'd be a list of duties that we would be responsible for. Many of these duties we're already responsible for. One of the ones that I'd like to bring to your attention is the student support or student advisement. That is a new one, but that has been requested by students in every shared governance committee that anyone's ever been on. So that is a new responsibility, but the group would have those responsibilities. The next step would that they would decide on their leadership. So in this particular group, everybody has decided to take on one of those duties. So this person's in charge of disputes and complaints. This is a faculty mentor. We've got student support person there, professional development, program review, communicating with deans. You can see that some people here don't have a duty, and that's because they're involved in another committee across campus and they just don't have time to do something extra. They might be involved in another group on campus, which is permissible. It's what we do. We're involved with many different teaching groups. So they don't have to do something. But nevertheless, this whole group has to report out to a subcommittee. So you have the IEC. This is an independent body that you don't, I mean, you have to communicate with your dean, but because there's this subcommittee, it takes, there's some perks to that. I won't go into that, but there are perks involved with communicating with the subcommittee rather than only your dean. This process involves a brief application just so that there's some sort of record what your committee's doing. It gets reported to the subcommittee, so there's a central hub. They know what's going on across campus. And then also an annual report, just a progress report of how you're doing, how you're meeting goals. Again, that report is something that's already being discussed, not necessarily something that's being mandated by the policy. It's tied into program review and the IEC process. Another outcome could be this. So this particular faculty group is involved with a majors program on campus, and you can see that everybody in this group has decided to do something. Because there aren't enough duties to go around for 8 to 12 people, there's redundancy. So maybe this particular year, this program or this group has a lot of new faculty members, and so they have a need for mentoring faculty. So many people are doing that. A couple of people here are really excited about professional development. Maybe they went to a conference last year and they want to teach the other faculty about what they learned. Again, same outcomes, all of that. And then finally, this particular outcome, this group has decided to give all of their duties to one person, which is a lead. And you might see that this is familiar. This is like a chair model. So this lead is in charge of everything, and then they would be in charge of communicating with their group. So really this document is meant to cover a bunch of models. Because not everybody wants to have a chair model, and not everyone wants to have this collective model. They can have everything in between. So that's what we meant by adaptable and flexible. Now there are lots of details associated with all of these things. We wanted to put together a very solid document so we can make something very clear for you and very sort of revisable. Okay, we didn't want to throw out some kind of willy-nilly plan and have a whole bunch of, vague things surrounding it. So that's what we have so far. So, and did you have a question, Martha?
Can we have
Did you get it answered?
I was just confused. I thought task team 3 came out of the planetary organization task teams 1 and 2. That took the next step to create a reorg for the next phase, as it were. This is the interim year, so you were assigned the duties of reorganization past the interim year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it wasn't assessment or something like this.
Well, no, the reorg was a response. The reorg conversation was in response to accreditation and our dings for assessment. One of the things, well, I don't know where it came from, but one of the issues is that faculty might not be aware of what's going on with their programs. Lots of things are done by deans, and they're not involved in the process. They might not have control over the process or what classes to teach and that sort of thing. And so it was thought that if faculty had more power at the program review level, that assessment would get done better, and that we would improve our accreditation score. So that's the idea of returning that back to faculty, because we're the ones who are seeing our students every day, not administrators.
I have to say, that, I mean, all this looks very interesting and all that, but I have to say I'm sitting here trying to still put pieces together.
Okay.
And the last piece I remember, and some of you will remember this and various other iterations of this, and we spent hours, not hours but weeks, probably more than weeks, probably some months, discussing, rehashing, and we finally voted on this in the spring, and this, when we left, was to be the plan that Academic Senate was supporting.
For this
year. And, well, a lot of it was a lot more permanent than this year. Permanent deans did not just mean permanently for this year. And so I have to say, I come back and I'm trying to understand how this fits in with this. And I don't want to be critical, but I've heard too little and too much. So there hasn't been any transparency in terms of the explanation that I've been offered as to how this is supposed to fit with this. And just a second, please. And in some ways, it's hard for me to fit these together because, all right, here's some of the things I've heard just around. One thing I heard was, well, Dr. Rocha didn't like this, so therefore, this didn't go anywhere. And so we'll end up with the model that he presented, which was those 4 deans. We were calling them super deans a year or so ago. And so the faculty's been told, well, if you want to have any say at all, you can have a say because you can come up with a plan for however you folks want to do things down here at this level. So I heard that. Then I heard, no, this is really all done with the viewpoint of accreditation. But that's also confusing to me because a year ago I did a lot of reading about what it was that other community colleges were getting whacked for when the accreditation team would come. And it was a lot around assessment, but it basically had to do with a lot of the colleges dragging their feet about assessing the what we call SLOs that had been established on those campuses. Now it's true, I didn't hear about too many campuses were in love with SLOs and with all the work that went with it. But what I kept reading in all these articles was accreditation teams, they were not concerned about whether faculty loved it or not. They were concerned about whether or not we were doing something and really basing our program development on this assessment. Well, about the same time in the math division, we rewrote, just not a lot, but we rewrote a couple SLOs and a couple courses. And so I put all my scores in there. And then one day when I saw Crystal, I said, now Crystal, I want to be clear about this. I said, every spring we sit down and hammer away putting in all these scores. And I said, but some of these aren't the same SLOs as they were a year or two ago. So then Crystal said, well, it is true that every time you rewrite the SLOs, we have to archive all the old data. So we can only continue aggregating data if it's been based on the same SLO. So that was a wrinkle for me to try to absorb. Then this past spring, nobody really was pushing doing much with SLOs at all. I know money dried up for the office that we had the people in that was helping us, but I must admit to you, I am more concerned now about the next phase of accreditation than I was before all this. Because I'm concerned, I don't know who has advised us that really this, moving this direction, is what the accreditation people are genuinely looking for. I mean, I keep hearing that it's our concern for accreditation that's driving all of this, but if they're going to come and they're going to want to see how we are using the results of the data we've collected over the last umpteen years, I don't think they're going to see that. And so I don't understand how all this is fitting together, I'll be real honest. So it isn't like I don't like all this, I think all this looks wonderful, but I do not see, and besides that, when do you envision that we move into this?
Okay, yeah, so you've asked 4 very big questions, and I'm trying to keep them in track because they're all very important questions. So I think you started out with that document that you have right there. And yes, so there was voting on it, and that is the administrative structure. That flow chart you have right there defines dean and above. It defines organization of schools or divisions or whatever have you. This is talking about how we're going to organize faculty right here below the dean level.
Well,
So-
yes, but this has some basic understandings here about how these things are going to fit together. Several
Right.
of your things talked about reporting to a dean.
Yes.
So that kind of implies that that particular picture we were looking at, all the individuals there would be somehow under at least one dean.
Not necessarily. So if you can imagine here that when we talk about flexibility, this group here could be an interdisciplinary group. It could be like a block. So you could have people teaching an English class and a science class and a social science class. And these are all faculty who are involved with that group of students. So the focus, these little yellow circles here, is the student focus. It's the outcome. It's around which all the faculty are organizing. So you could have a scenario where you have this group that is not functioning under one dean and would necessarily have to communicate with multiple deans. Now, we're using the term dean loosely because, again, we need to organize faculty and take control of ourselves. We don't really know what's going on above our level in administration. And so the beauty of this document, it allows us to organize and adapt ourselves no matter what happens at that level where you have that flow chart. Second of all, the SLO conversation, that's a really big one. It's long. It is important for accreditation. It's tied to program review. I guess what's sort of pertinent to our discussion in SLOs is that each of these groups would define their student measures of success. So they would have a group of SLOs, or they might, they might look at student success as the number of students that get a certificate or get a couple, a certain number of units or transfer. In the application, you're going to define that. And so I don't know what's going on with Crystal and iPro and the slows, but that's sort of it's a bit of a tangential conversation. It is related, but it's nothing we have control over. It's nothing we're changing. It's nothing we're complicating the issue with. Your last comment was when this was going to be implemented. Is that right, or did I miss a third?
Well, I really wasn't trying to organize them 1, 2, 3.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure that I respond to all of them. When this is going to be implemented, the goal is to get something in place that we all agree on by fall 2013. So the goal is to get something implemented, get something accessible, so when the accreditation team comes back, I think in 2015, that we can have something to show for our efforts. And we can say, look, we took your recommendations to heart, this is what we're doing, this is why we think it works. You know, and really, yeah, there are lots of different plans, but the committees, the task teams that met, we're all intelligent people, and these are based on research, it's based on what we think will work. It's not what the accreditation committee is expecting to find. It's kind of up to us. We need to say this is what we're going to do, and this is how it meets your standards, period. Might not be what other schools are doing across the state, but that's not, we don't have to abide by a certain set of rules.
I'd like to respond to you. The plan that you have, where we have permanent deans, that was passed by the Academic Senate. It was also passed by College Council. At the last meeting of the Board of Trustees before school started in fall, those plans were completely thrown away, and the President's plan for revising the entire administration went forward, and that's what the Board passed. That really has nothing to do with accreditation. And I'll point out that our last accreditation visit, we were actually cited and complimented on our strong organization. So this revision of the deans and getting rid of the deans is completely separate from accreditation. I was on this committee, and I worked through the summer. I honestly cannot say whether I'm for it or against it. I will say that I am for the Academic Senate taking a look at it. It will change the way we do things below the dean level. It has something to do with deans, though, because we take some of the responsibilities of the deans, specifically organizing programs and assessing programs, and makes the faculty responsible for those things. But so it is related. I am not sure if I'm for or against this, because I know a lot of faculty just think their deans are swell, they get along great with them, and they like things just keep going the way they are. But I also know that a lot of faculty aren't. A lot of faculty don't get along with their deans, and they're very frustrated. So I want people to take a look at this and see if this is possibly going to help them in their divisions.
Yes, and I'd like to just add on, the duty separations were based on recommendations from task teams 1 and 2. So we did not define the duty separations. Task teams 1 and 2 said if we have a chair model, what would deans do, what would chairs do? If we had a more collective model, what would the deans do, what would the collectives do? I think Martha had her up next, and then Yolanda.
Oh, no.
Eduardo.
And I just have I've been trying to figure out how it can help with program review. In large part because the collectives would be approved through IEC, which that wouldn't make them a program. CNI they would have to go through CNI to be a program. So that it's a cross-disciplinary collective, each of them would have to take part in the program review in their discipline area. I mean, this would work for people who had like departments, like social science, and then collectives within that larger division.
Right.
But it wouldn't work as effectively for me because the kind of collectives I'd be joining would be outside of English. It would be cross-disciplinary.
No, it would work for you. It would work for you. You don't have to, if you paired up with, say, me, if you and I wanted to teach a block, that doesn't require that you go through CNI, because you're not...
To be a program.
Well, sure, yes.
So
if you and I really wanted to work together and we knew other faculty who were really passionate about this program, we could put together an application and maybe submit it to the IEC, and then they would also be in contact with CNI, and if it became, I don't know the details of that, but yeah, it could work. It's meant for more sort of non-traditional ideas like that to work as well as the traditional ideas that, you know, are the foundation of our school. So if you see something in the language that precludes that from working, you really want to say something, because that is not the intention.
I think the program review thing.
Yeah, then write it down and let's work it out. Sorry, Yolanda and then Eduardo and then.
So if somebody writes up an idea for a program, and so or a collective, then what do? Put a call out who wants to join my collective? So what if you have people, so anybody who wants to join can join your collective? You can't kick people out if you don't like them in the collective?
Well, so generally, this idea of collectives, I mean, I've gotten a lot of responses, well, isn't this already what we do? And it is. It's organically how we function. We talk to colleagues, we come up with really great ideas, and it takes advantage of that natural tendency to do that. So, you know, I would doubt that you'd have to like seriously recruit people, because I'm sure you've talked to faculty and they want to work with you, and you guys are really excited about something, and you could just do that.
But what if, I mean, so anybody can join any collective. Like, for example, you talked about you have these people doing this and these people doing this. And I know that when I read this document that it had a 20% compensation and pay for the person who does program review and the person who does counseling.
Yes.
So the people that are doing all the rest of the stuff, they don't get anything extra, they just get the extra work?
No, they would get that counting toward their 5 hours of shared governance. But again,
what do you mean?
What do you mean? What do I mean?
They would get that counted towards their 5
Well,
hours.
you would submit a progress report of your collective, and in it you'd have to name each of the faculty members in your collective and what they've been doing. And of course it's going to be work, and so you could, I mean, each of us are supposed to do 5 hours a week of shared governance. So this would give you credit for that. Contract. Whereas right now, a lot of us.
But now we have to document that as well?
Sure.
Because we've never had to document that.
Yeah, it's supposed to be unsupervised.
Right. Well, it could be part of your evaluation process. It's in our contract, right, Roger?
Yes, you have to do shared governance.
And so how do you account
Very
for
loosely.
that? Very loosely.
Just the way we like it.
And so we don't necessarily want faculty to be involved in shared governance.
Well, no, we didn't say that.
No, but 3 hours already of our 5 hours is spent just sitting here.
Right. So if you were a senator, you would probably want to abstain. So if you're working in a group like this, you would be one of these people that would not take on extra duty. You'd be aware of what your collective is doing. You'd have input. This would be like a meeting maybe every month. It depends on what you guys decide, but no extra work. Or, you could be in this one where you're not doing anything and there's one person that's leading you. So let's go. Eduardo, you were next.
So let me get this right. I got a statement and a couple of questions. So if I wrote real quickly, a major area for improvement is linking student success outcomes to programs, assessing them, and implementing improvements, correct? That answers my question. Now, so if we're trying to do it is, in regards to these SLOs, for example, my department, our thing was that some of the courses were using outdated books. So all we had to do is update the books, and we're now in compliance. It's a very simple process, but what you're presenting here is like creating 20 steps to make toast when it could have been just put the bread in there. And so I'm seeing this as a very complicated process. And I don't see how doing it our way, just simply updating, is better than creating all these models.
So in your division, I mean, you have the bread ready to go to pop into the toaster.
Right.
Other divisions need to actually go and harvest their wheat and push it and make a bread and bake it and then toast it.
Right,
so
but under this model, we would have to be part of this now.
But this is meant to be inclusive.
Okay, so let me continue then. And then you mentioned the word silo. I've also heard the word collectives, and over the past couple of weeks, I've heard the words hives and pods.
Yeah.
So is hives and pods coming out of this
Pods are not us.
Okay.
Forget about pods.
And why collectives? As a former member of the military, historian, we fought many years against communism, and I use collectives with communism. So who came up with that word to call us a collective?
It must have been a communist.
It must have been. That's my fault. I'm sorry. We've also been actually using the term collaborative. I think that the idea here is, and I know this doesn't happen in social science, where some faculty members do a lot of shared governance work and other faculty members don't do anything. I know that doesn't happen in your division.
Of course.
Just in our division, right? Just only the two of us, right? But the idea here, though, is that this allows for us to have, and since you're part of the military, you understand this, that we deal better when we're accountable to each other and when we're not necessarily always accountable to somebody else.
Or with a
just
gun
like our
around.
students, right? Well, that's going to be a different conversation. But what this might allow you to do is, and I use the example that I think, because particularly the collaborative model for me, I work with a lot of underrepresented students, African Americans, Latinos, LGBT students, trying to get them through to be successful. What it allows me to do now is work cross-disciplinary to say, hey, how can we, Math and I, start to work with my underperforming African American students, and rather than it being like a separate special duty, I just get to hang out with Pat Beach all the time now, right? And we can now work through this process together as opposed to me having it to be what it is currently, which is an extra thing, right? Like currently, in order to do some of this cross-pollination work, it is one more task. This process says, hey, I like Pat. Pat and I get along. And what the hell, we like Eduardo too. Why don't we get you over here? Right?
So
and it allows for us to kind of negotiate that for around a common interest and goal.
Right, and so the word hive was what was thrown around in our committee. Roger Yang came up with this analogy of a beehive and working together. I switched to collective because I thought it was a little more professional than hive, but if you guys like hive, I'm a biologist, I can go with But
who's a queen bee?
there is no queen bee, that's the problem, unless you want this model, and then you elect your own queen bee.
And one final thing, the part of disputes and complaints, what's that process?
We can talk about those details. We just really want to make sure, we're going really late, we just want to make sure we can talk about those. I'm sorry, Lenore, Jan, and then Christine. She's had her hand up, sorry.
So, as I understand this, you form a collective, you put in your application to IEC, and at that point, if approved, it becomes incumbent upon your collective to create SLOs, because you at that point have to do review.
Well,
you have to measure some sort of student success.
Exactly.
And this is an addition.
So the student measures of success could be transfers or certificates. Most of the collectives are going to be formed around existing programs.
SLOs, yeah.
So you already have your SLOs, you won't have to do more.
But let's say like a block wants to form a collective. And that's completely interdisciplinary. We've never had to form SLOs before.
We have to though.
But now we would
We're
have to.
supposed to anyway, yeah.
Under this system, we would have to.
Well, we're supposed to even without this system. That's our future.
Yeah.
Right. So this is just kind of formalizing that, I think.
Yeah, it's a movement, that's happening with the IEC and program review. And so there are SLOs for your program or your class, but then there are also student measures of outcome measures. So, keeping track of how many of your students are transferring or having certificates or completing a certain number of units. It varies, so we want the collective to be able to define their own measures.
So, okay, I guess my mega question then, at that level then, is IEC now becomes responsible for looking at program reviews and the measures that are coming out of collectives of student success.
You mean, how do you
like
mean looking at the
who are
measures?
these collectives accountable to? Who do we have to answer to and say, look, we're doing a good job?
IEC would be like the organizing body. They would be in charge of making sure, people are doing what they should be doing, helping them in that process. It's a supportive role for sure.
You're also accountable to deans, though.
Oh yeah,
in other senses, right?
Your deans would be looking at these reports as well. They have to be aware of what's going on to them, but you're going to be responsible mostly for your program. Your dean's not dictating what you have to do and what you have to teach, and all that kind of stuff. So Dan, are you done with your?
Yeah.
Okay. If you have a additional question, sorry. Two more. Okay, Dan. I did not. If you notice too, if you're concerned about the amount of work, I think it was already mentioned, the student advisement and the program review, we're going to ask 20% release time for each of those because those will take more work than the others.
Well, I think I get the faculty part, and I really like that because it does sound like a lot of what some of us already have done or have tried to do and not been terribly successful. The part that I think I'm not really clear on is the role of the IEC subcommittee, and what I'm really concerned about is the interface between all of these different collectives and the deans, because obviously we are all individually linked to a dean, and therein lies the problem. Here you are doing all of this work, but then you still have to be evaluated by your dean. Your dean still has to schedule you. And when you participate in hiring and other kinds of issues like that, we are answering to deans, and it just seems to me like that's something we really need to think about. That's where the tension lies, obviously.
Right. So yes. So there is this issue of the deans, and so the subcommittee is meant to be an independent oversight. So. In my mind, they're there to maintain the integrity of what faculty groups want to do, essentially. So I can't imagine this, but if your dean was like, I'm gonna get you on your evaluations because you're part of this collective, then the IEC subcommittee would get a report of that. You in your annual report would say, you know what, we can't meet our student success objectives because my dean is not scheduling a classroom for us. Or, we're being knocked down because we're involved with this, and that subcommittee would then deal with it. We don't have, that much foresight in trying to figure out what kind of, I guess, strength they would have in doing that, but that's the role of that, is to give you an independent body to work under, because many deans they're not equal, they're not all created equally. So, but yeah, you're right, we need to continue that conversation and make sure that the language in the document gives us real power for that.
Thank you, Valerie. All right, I know it's late, so let's just zoom through the rest of this. Okay, I just have a very, very quick report. Okay, first at the Board of Trustees meeting last Wednesday, 3 policies that we passed in spring were approved. That would be 4020, the enrollment management was approved. And then the 2 faculty hiring, 6100 and 6150. Sorry? Take a step back. So 4020, 6100, and 6150 were all approved. And second, I know you all received my email, but I'd like to again publicly thank all who worked on preparing Professional Development Day. Very positive response across the board to that day, and I'd like to thank all the people who presented during Professional Development Day for making those workshops as successful as they all were. So again, thank you to everybody who made that day possible. And that's my report. Vanilla?
Great. Hey, so thank you all for a wonderful Professional Development Day. The big thing I would like you to announce back is that there's going to be a survey that will be emailed to faculty about what worked and didn't work. And as you saw this year, we tried to adapt as much of Professional Development Day based on last year's survey. So encourage your faculty to give us all of the fantastic feedback that they possibly can. Thank you.
Okay. Secretary's report?
I don't have anything to report, but I will remind people that I have office hours on Wednesdays from 12 to 2, and I have been very lonely in there. And should you have individual concerns, by all means, feel free to stop by. I'm in the Academic Senate office every Wednesday.
I don't know it.
Thank you. Okay, and FA report?
Well, we have a Thursday meeting this week. We probably the word is out. We were given by Dr. Rocha extraordinarily aggressive contract counterproposal, including cuts in healthcare for new hires and massive cuts in overload pay and cuts for retirees' healthcare. It was rather a grim day for us. Now, we made a counterproposal and we're holding our ground. We are also going to curb officially on the winter, and I realize it's a very difficult subject, but we do think it's absolutely part of our integrity to maintain every possible avenue we can to hold on to winter. Win, lose, or draw. Probably there's no draw on this. But come on, we'll have more of a discussion, a full discussion of that. We are meeting with Dr. Rocha at 10 o'clock on Wednesday, and a number of us are going to be out of town Thursday, Friday, Saturday at the Community College Independence Group. There were 13 groups, 13 districts. It's a very, very useful thing. And I do want to raise one other thing. I'm in good contact with Carl Friedlander. Now, he's a ranking person on the statewide CFT, California Federation of Teachers. So he's a union person. Now, we're not CFT, we're independent. But he's meeting this week over the San Francisco situation, accreditation issues. And I'm wondering if it might be useful. He's an extraordinarily interesting guy. He's one of the first English majors to graduate from Caltech back in the day. But I've respected him, and he's very, very knowledgeable. It might be, we can invite him to campus and perhaps some kind of Senate FA combo, or just even the Senate, because he would just give us straight, particularly the accreditation issue. We have 20 community college districts that are on some kind of watch out of the 72. That's way, way too many. And of course, 3, I forget the College of the Canyons, I'm sorry, College of the Redwoods, San Francisco, and the third one I forget, but Quest, who are on the brink. And so it's just absurd that the accreditation team is running this far afield. We hope that with Bryce Harris, the new chancellor, there will be some movement in this area. To be fair, Jack Scott did next to nothing to really take on what is obviously a runaway accreditation process, an accreditation team. So a little bit more of that in the future, but come to our meeting on Thursday at noon in Circadia. We'll have small snacks, not a big spread.
Thank you. Thank you, Roger. Okay, anybody going to report for FAC? Okay, Mark.
You know, I can make it for FAC. There will be on this campus November 3rd, that's a Saturday coming up. The FAC statewide part-timer conference is going to be, we're helping sponsor it. It'll be in Preveling, and certainly stop in, and obviously part-timer issues are getting worse. Consider that our numbers of part-timers are down by over 200 people since '09. And these are real human beings who have lost their jobs. And of course, many other part-timers have even lost part of their load or most of it. So it's a very good thing. The FAC people like us. We're a big campus and we have a lot of FAC members, so it might be something you might stop in. November 3rd.
Mark, any report?
Nothing.
Okay, so announcements. The fall plenary session that we will all be attending on the executive committee is November 8th to 10th at the Irvine Marriott. Just as a reminder, we did vote today to have our next meeting at the Circadian, so we'll be meeting on the 22nd at the Circadian. And if you'd like to serve, to be considered for serving on the bylaws committee, you can let us know right now, or anytime between now and November, I think it was 5th. Okay, thank you. Now, any motion to adjourn? Thank you, Mark. Second? Okay. Meeting adjourned.
Well, welcome, Kathleen.
It's just,
Pass.
I've been going straight.
I have an answer. Yeah, that's right. The connection between this plan and accreditation. I went to a couple of conferences and I asked those exact same questions that you asked me, and they clarified it to me, and that's probably more valuable.